Sup, my fellas, don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story. Our hero's thoughts are in front of us, he simply has the life of a dream. He has not even made anything up, everything stands before his eyes as if it were yesterday. But what was yesterday is what we are about to see. Our hero was a knight, he was fighting someone, he was having fun because he was getting full pleasure from the battle. They found that the enemy was too slow, but it was inattention that ruined him. She had always been his problem. He just wanted to play around out of boredom and he scowled. His armor began to crumble after the hit, which was very frustrating because it was to be expected. He immediately flew at the serpent, or rather even a dragon parody, with the words that he would just stab it to death. Rage was also his problem. He fell into rage very easily, so it was because of this that at that moment he just kept striking at the serpent with his fists. It wasn't from his character, he just liked the feeling, the very feeling when his strength increased, that's what he liked. He took his sword, with the serpent's head there. He liked swinging his sword with my magic, but dying, he sure didn't like it. All because he had a secret. At that moment he opened his eyes again, and made as if a woman in front of him. Did it sleep? Yes. Where did she come from? Did he really have a groupie following him around at all? Too exhausted for that. The woman came up to him and kissed him, a light morning kiss, and touched his forehead. He loved it, because he got it from such an incredible beauty. Had she been there the whole time admiring him? He couldn't hold back any longer, he wanted to kiss you on the lips. However, at that very moment he realized that he was just a baby. He began to cry. His mother thought that he wanted to eat something, but in fact he cried because he had changed his clothes once again. Consequently, the past life he still died, no idea how it came out, but what he will be, there to name him. Unlike other people, he is reborn every time after death, and so to infinity. But still it was worth to eat. After all, what was to be sad? Why to be upset? After all, it was his 101 at birth. Before our hero's eyes began to fly through his past life. His life as a student, his life as a knight, even that same samurai. After all, if his memory serves him right, but his first life was spent in Korea. That very life was Adam, a whirlwind of endless interviews and job searches. The same dreary life that no one could have dreamed of, with an equally dreary ending. For when it was abruptly cut short by being hit by a car, he was reborn for the first time. Upon waking up, he found himself in the body of an infant, totally unfamiliar family alien. It was from then on that he began to be reborn again and again. Amazingly, he came in different worlds and eras. But the scenario of his life has repeated itself time and time again. He didn't have much to brag about, he was just used to this state of affairs and going with the flow. The rebirth that many dream of has become something commonplace to him. However, while he was drinking his milk, he wondered where he had gotten to this time. After all, judging by the interior that he is now somewhere in the Middle Ages, it is unlikely that he was back on Earth. It was not even logical for a rebirth. Did it mean that he had simply been reborn in another world? But he did not complain, for it was the other worlds that he liked, for they were usually much more comfortable. He was even lucky, for it seems that he was born rich. There were even a great many maids he liked. What that means is that he comes from a noble family, and his mother loves him very much. Our hero didn't understand their language at first, but after a second he got used to it. Of course, it was a new world and a new language for him. It often happens that you don't understand much at first when you find yourself in a new world. But the warm hands, the gentle gaze of total love. This is what all speaks for itself, because his mother really loves him. Having changed 100 mothers, he can tell exactly which ones give birth clean out of a sense of duty, and which ones don't. As bitter as it may sound, there are times when he was abandoned immediately after birth, or forced to work off the life he was given. However, he had a great feeling about this life. He heard one of the maids call to his mother, asking her to watch over the young prince. At that moment he realized that he was a prince. At the same moment the maid said that of course she didn't think so. But the mistress asked her to answer honestly, for they were alone in the room anyway. She asked if she also thought ill of her son. The maid immediately began to justify herself by saying that recently one of the maids had been excessive. Why there was such an expression on her mother's face as well as there about the voices. And the lady went on to say that even though he was a prince and had imperial blood in him, his fate would certainly not be an easy one. It would have been easier if her son had not been a prince at all. She looked at our hero and begged his forgiveness because she hoped he would not be offended. She knew that this was the case now that they were discussing him and the baby, for it was because of her that our hero had no right to inherit the throne. She blamed herself, but our hero made everything so that his hand wiped away her tears. She immediately came to her senses, for she realized that most likely her son understood something. Our hero saw how yours was very difficult, so he showed with all his appearance that she was not sad. He didn't even care if they inherited the throne, because the prince's life is already lucky for him. He would just ignore all sorts of clingy nobles who would pester him in the future. Yes, and the imperial family will not be able to control him because the life of the prince promises to be busy. His 101st and Jubilee new life in his new world. Isn't it a dream? That is how the life of the emperor's son, as well as former servants, began. Such were the half-bloods our hero turned out to be. A life that could be spent quite well, if not all, in politics. He could almost every day screw around with women and have fun with absolutely anything his soul wanted. In him flowed the blood of the emperor, and he would be guaranteed more or less comfortable conditions. He dreamed of eternal trips hunting, but all the time he was lying in his bed, making sounds and rejoice his mother. He seemed happy, carefree, but still she was a little sad, because if so she had the power to shield him from all this, it would be much better. Our hero heard these words of strength and thought, for strength would not hurt anyone. To him, however, it was the usual thing for him. Not having the right to the throne is weakness. No one needs you. If you are a weak man, no one will stand up for you, no one will even look for a way to get rid of you. However, he believed he wasn't worth worrying about, for his new mother's son has lived too many warrior lives. 3 months later, while our hero was sleeping and his mother was waking him up again, she noticed that he had an incredible beautiful hair color. By then, however, one of the maids said that the lady's carriage had already arrived, so kissed her son goodbye on the forehead and told him not to miss her, for she would be back soon. As soon as they all came out, our hero just rejoiced, for he had such a cool dream and he was awakened. He hoped the babysitter wasn't still running to him, because there wasn't even a second of peace. Since he was a baby, all everyone did was take care of him. I was very tired of such hyper-parop, but all the while he was alone, he decided to check something. It was on this that his future depended. He even hoped that the emperor's blood contained some kind of ancestral power. After all, if it did, he would have to learn how to use it. He decided to concentrate and to gather all his power. He understood that the world is ruled by the strongest. Only when you are strong no one dares to oppose you. At least, it was our hero who had the opportunity to use the experience of the previous 100 lives, because even in a child's body he could accumulate inner strength, and that meant only that the power was available. He remembered his 30th life, which meant that he could use the techniques of Hongwen chants. He should also try practicing skills from his other lives at the same time. Even in a child's body should be able to do it. No one would even think that a child of this age could train. However, if the case burns out, by about age 10, his inner strength will increase manifold, and by age 20, he will be indestructible at all. He would still be concentrating on energy, and that's the only way he could train. He would even be able to train while Nanny held him in her arms. So he decided to speed up the flow from his whole body, to gather all the energy together. He could already feel the flow, but his head was really splitting, so he decided to release all the energy. It wasn't like he was screaming that he was just diapering right now, and our hero that she would just walk away from him and stop touching him. After all, even a little touch would make all his stored energy disappear. He prayed to fate that this would not happen. It was at that moment that his prayers were answered. The babysitter went away, thinking only that he was probably having nightmares. So as soon as he came out, our hero felt that his energy was at its maximum. He thought he just needed to sustain it, but he was feverish. He hoped that making such a baby could withstand it all, but the thought that it was better to die than to live in a weakling's body kept him from giving up. He began to store up as much energy as he could. He continued his work, for it was also that he could live a prosperous life. At this point he was called out. Even the maid heard it all. She suddenly ran to his room, because she thought that something had happened. Our hero was sweating profusely for some reason. She even thought that he was sleeping, so she decided to prepare a bath with herbs and then bathe him. Our hero, on the other hand, when he saw what Tam had run off to prepare the bath, got to his feet abruptly and his eyes shone with happiness because everything worked. The maid came running back to him, asking him how he was doing, forever carrying him in her arms. She praised him for every little success, and all he could think of was how lucky he was that Nanny hadn't noticed. All using the mana concentration technique, he could now easily accumulate it in his body, and he doesn't even need to do anything to do that, because he gets stronger even when he just eats or sleeps. He couldn't even contain a smile on his face, and everything would just explode with happiness. After all, he could already accumulate so much energy in 3 years that it would be comparable to most adults in power, and when he turned 10, it was hard to even imagine. He was sure that no one in this world could beat him, not even if he lived 100 lifetimes. At that moment, the maid noticed something strange, a sound coming from above. However, distracted again, I noticed that our hero had this wonderful smile on his face. At the same time, he was thinking that he would get stronger and stronger, so that he would soon live like a king. He could not even wait for such a moment. He longed for that day to come as soon as possible. It had been exactly 5 months since he was born. Thanks to the mana absorption technique, his physical capabilities would greatly increase, and his inner energy would already be boiling faster than all his peers. After all, everyone should have known that mana is automatically collected. Even though he was now crawling on the floor, still didn't stop trying, because soon for sure his power would overtake the available one. However, at this point, for some reason began to rise from the carpet. It was just his mother who took him in her arms. She brought him a toy that he certainly couldn't have expected to see. He just couldn't take his eyes off of it. But noticing his mother's disappointment, he immediately started playing with it. Even though he looked like he was having fun, inside he felt a Spanish shame about what he was doing. The maid and mistress laughed, for their baby looked so happy, but in whom was he ever born so handsome? You couldn't say our hero didn't like it. He adored being praised. However, in spite of that, he understood that he was so beautiful in his mother. However, since he is loved, he still did not say that he did not like to play the fun child, because this time is too fleeting and therefore priceless. At this point, the grimace on our hero's face immediately changed. I am not mistress could not understand what he wanted here. However, our hero wanted only one thing. He wanted to eat. Tears began to flow from his eyes. He tried to show it with all his appearance. Immediately she guessed that it was so at that very moment he was given milk. While our hero was busy drinking milk, the conversation was about the financial situation. Despite the fact that the prince needs to be well fed, but since yesterday the funds kept dwindling. There was nothing the mistress could do about it, however, because the budget for the upkeep of the mansion had been severely cut this year. Even one child was hard to raise. Our hero remembered hearing such talk from the maids not long ago. He had heard that he would have to make great savings on his mistress's rations. For if this did not happen, no one would survive the season. They had no other choice. Our hero couldn't believe it, for he thought this type of talk was definitely not serious. But the mistress maintained a positive line. She said that even if she died, it was okay because others would survive. Not they suggested something, and our hero was worried. Because is it all true? Because his mother really simple concubine, she did not even have power, not status, even taking into account the fact that she gave birth to a prince. He was not even a prince and he had no power, not even status. Something had to be done, otherwise something bad would surely happen to the prince. Our hero could not believe it, because he thought that since he was a prince, he would not be allowed to die of infancy. I was not offered to see the king himself. She as a mistress said that it is simply impossible, because he is very busy. Our hero began to understand that now it has become clear to him where his mother was constantly going in a carriage. She wanted an audience with the king and it seems that she did not succeed. But no matter how cruel the ruler was, it is unacceptable to behave in such a way to the mother of your children. Why does he do this to his mother? Because she is enough abuse from the nobles. What to do? Because even if the king was originally indifferent to her, such an attitude is simply inadmissible. Our hero began to cry, which allowed the nanny to give him into the hands of his mother. He really wanted to help her. Even though he was a child, he knew he could do something. Nothing much came into his mind, but he had to think of something. All he had to do was to get through this winter, because in fact it was all about the lack of money for all his needs. And in the winter there was a new item of expenditure, heating. He thought, how could he help at all? What exactly could he do? At one point, however, he realized there was still one thing. He thought about the fact that if coal is a carbon structure, like diamonds, and he noticed that Mama wears precious stones, then in this world they are also very valuable. That is, if he had no money, he could at least get valuable stones, and his legs were too short, so he could not get out of his bed. He realized that he had to think of something else, because with all the amount of mana he had, he was able to take off. Now he could fly to his destination. He realized that no one had enough charcoal anyway, and most importantly there was plenty in the fireplace. He wanted to turn that pile with one easy move of his hand, but he decided to hurry because he had to make gems out of it while everyone was asleep. He headed for thermal energy, then created a certain temperature pressure necessary to transform the coal. He didn't hesitate to spend all the mana. It was still she would save more if she survived. He didn't want to let the energy drain out in any way. He stirred up more and more of his inner energy each time, while I held back. He knew that if it worked, his mother would be happy. All he wanted was for his mother to smile and be happy with her life. At this point, the whole stove was up in smoke. Our hero succeeded. He got such a beautiful and shimmering diamond, he was sure it was just that. The only thing left for him to do was to find a way to slip it in. He was glad that he had succeeded, so that the morning when Nanny came to his room he noticed it in my bed. She couldn't figure out how he got out of his bed, even though the bed was too high. Had our hero really spent all that night on the cold floor? She took him in her arms and noticed also that he was too dirty. It even seemed to her that it was because the palace had not been cleaned for a long time. They were very lucky that our hero had not frozen. And our hero thought that you needn't worry, for the most important thing is that his mother is all right. The babysitter noticed that our hero was holding something in his mouth. She asked what was in his mouth, for had he swallowed something. However, as soon as our hero opened his mouth, she saw he had a diamond. She did not know where he had found it, for had he really been lying on the floor? She could not understand it, because while you stubbornly she missed it, you could get a decent sum of money. She thought that just because of this they could get away, and for this not easy situation, she hugged our hero, saying that he was a real smart guy. It is most likely after this moment wagons with supplies poured into the palace, they received enough firewood to survive this winter. Filled with groceries, in general, that very diamond was just at the most favorable price to cover 5 years of living expenses. But did they do the right thing? Because what if it belonged to someone? That it simply could not be, for all the castle had been put up for nearly 100 years before the lady settled. Everyone thought it was a gift from God that was sent from heaven for their prince. Mother was very happy, for she believed that it was in fact a gift from God. Here our hero was just technology for her dress, telling her to wait until he grew up. He would surely deliver her from all her worries. He imagined himself as an adult standing in front of his mother, but at that moment he was too young. For he had promised himself that he would open his eyes to everyone would hear about him, Arella. It was thanks to all this that the palace kept the fireplace warm all winter long. The mistress could not even eat most of the food alone, but the nanas told her not to think about anything, because she just had to eat her fill. Everyone was glad to see them. Everyone was glad to see the new maids, and the very words that had to be fired were hired again. But the most important thing was that our hero's mother stopped being sad. She was always beautiful, always smiling, but they spent it in warmth and comfort. A year later from that moment the babysitters chose a suit for our hero. Those were good, but Mama still chose clothes of a stricter nature. He almost did not like anything, and in general he did not like to change clothes. After all, what kind of holiday approached that they made him so tired? Could not they leave the prince alone? He could think of nothing better to do than to lie down on the floor and cry. He was immediately soothed and lulled and put to bed. He was glad that everyone was finally getting away from him. Nanny, on the other hand, was glad, for today was the very day when they would finally be able to officially introduce everyone to the prince of the imperial family. Our hero heard this. I was shocked, for had she really become this day? But the mistress said that he must be recognized. After all, despite all the faults and it flows in the imperial blood, birthday is the best reason. His Majesty had to show up, too, she was sure. He just can't ignore them forever. Nanny began to reassure her, however, because they just often try to stay away from their newborn children. Our first one was even more shocked, because is his birthday really so soon? Would everyone be preparing a very large banquet for such a? The mistress, on the other hand, was very happy, for her son would officially become one with the royal family. She was glad, for the laws of the empire were on her son's side. Errol, on the other hand, was anxious, very anxious, but smiling at the same time. This could not make him not happy. However, whether all the other aristocrats would attend this banquet, he even wished at last to see his father, whom he had not seen since his birth. At the banquet, however, there were an incredible number of aristocrats as well as people who ran errands. Our hero was incredibly curious how much money had been spent on all this. After all, even in spite of all this, everyone was incredibly dressed up. Is that the way everyone dresses for banquets? It's not that our hero didn't like it all, but he was a little confused by the new faces, because the prince had never seen so many people. His mother began to calm him down, because everything was good, because he was the most important there. But the aristocrats had already started to look at him obliquely, but he did not pay attention to them, because no one needed them. This and where was his emperor, who was his father? He just wanted to look into his shameless eyes, for he was the one who never showed his nose after making a child. But it was at this time that he realized he didn't have to worry about it, because he just had to know what he looked like in case there was an inheritance tour. But soon after the banquet began, these people did arrive, the imperial family. Our hero immediately began to pull on his mother's dress, asking her with all his appearance, was it really the acting empress and her children? Yes, with all his appearance he showed that she was the empress, and her children looked like her. And in the middle stood the eldest. Most of all, why were they all so serious? Because they all passed by his mother as if she didn't exist. But in spite of all this, our hero's mother was not offended by their piggish behavior. She asked our hero if anything was bothering him, or not, because it should be over soon, she promises him. Next, while our hero's mother was smiling, he realized that her gaze was going somewhere. He was staring at our hero's father, who reeked of incredible energy. After all, he was just walking by, and all the chattering nobles and services immediately fell silent. Why did they all bow their heads before him? After all, even our hero felt the power emanating from him at the level of instincts. He could not understand, was it his father looking at him, or his mother? He was very sorry that rebirth did not also give him the ability to read other people's thoughts. How nice it would be if our hero knew what everyone else was thinking. After a while, everyone started to give him presents, everyone congratulated him, and it was a great honor for everyone to see him. When the time came for the imperial family to congratulate him, they did not hesitate to openly express their attitude toward him and our hero's mother. All this attitude could not leave our hero alone. He was tearing himself out of his mother's hands to attack that bitch properly. For how dare she treat him and his mother like that? She does not even consider them people. He realized that absolutely everyone there was just as nasty and rotten inside. He thought, should he really check on them now, just by taking a shout? But our hero didn't want to embarrass his mother. He decided that the best way now was to remain a goody-goody. After all, everyone around was hypocritical. At that time it was common, unfortunately. He only wanted to leave as soon as possible before he fell asleep right in his mother's arms, but at that moment, while he wanted to sleep the girl, he realized that she was probably one of the daughters of one of the concubines from the emperor himself. She was even still at that age. Mistress, however, those had already left. When the banquet came to an end, our hero together with his mother could breathe a sigh of relief in unison. But it did not end there either, because his mother was approached by the empress herself. She said that she got to them without any problems, all thanks to her son, the heir to the throne, because he was always there. Our hero could not understand, did the empress boast of her son? But that is exactly what we should have expected from the empress. She is in spite of all this, the empress began to say that our hero was very sweet and very much like his mother. Our hero did not see anything bright in this, because surely it was she who had a hand in their plight. Even if no one cares, the financing of the castle would not be lowered to the plinth so drastically. They had to use knights for firewood, and his clothes appeared to be sewn by servants from rags and scraps. At the same time, the empress wished our hero a long life and everything else, but as she left, she smirked. At that moment the mistress saw someone she definitely could not have expected to see. She saw the emperor himself. He asked her if she was used to the castle, but you could probably even say that our hero's mother lied, which is more than normal. It was these words of our hero were very much surprised, because he too wished only one thing, that the emperor would give them money, was a man, which and was worth to be in reality. Our hero began to scream a lot, so that it prompted the emperor to ask to take hold of his son, whom he had not seen for a year. He wanted to look at him. The emperor did not understand why our hero was not crying, for while his other children were crying non-stop when they saw his face. Our hero, however, was just smiling. He wanted his old Snivell to spread puddles under his feet from such a stunning smile. The emperor certainly liked him. After all, so far he was not afraid of him, even put it through picking up in the future. Our hero began to make a strange movement to prompt the emperor to put him down. He thought that he would walk, but the mistress said that he could not yet walk. She said that he was only a year old. But at that moment our hero just took off and walked. Errol understood that he was the star of the evening. Then he had to show everything he could do. Everyone was ecstatic, because finally their little guy took his first step. It interested even the emperor, who realized that our hero is full of surprises. Our hero, in turn, understood that there is still a little bit left, because he will show him that he is definitely different from other children. He will show it in front of everyone. After all, he is the very same Prince Errol. However, as soon as he came to the table and wanted to hold on to it, the whole table with the products just took and began to fall down on it. All the tablecloth together with the drinks also flew down. He was very worried, because all the products began not just fall to the floor, they just began to break, scatter and develop. But that's okay, because that's how it was meant to be. Everyone is so excited by the first steps of the prince that no one will notice that this is a well-planned strategy. He chose the right moment, because that's exactly what he wanted. And also, for a frightening effect, just take it and shout. He is, after all, a child after all. While he was lying on the floor, he was picked up by the emperor, who asked to see him. He saw that our hero was only soiled in wine, but nothing more. He was in one piece and also needed to change him. Lenka already wanted to take it from the emperor, but he asked to stand because she had torn off his outer clothing and noticed the terrible clothes that were under it. All better began to notice it, because why was the prince dressed in such bad clothes? What happened to her at all? However, the emperor asked everyone to be silent, for what kind of life was the mistress, as well as her son, that they live in such poor condition. But in fact, this morning, while I was changing Nanny's clothes, he concentrated all his energy and began to stretch the cloth as hard as he could. It gave in easily, so he had to give it a shabby look, which certainly wasn't difficult. If he had grown muscles, he would not have had to resort to magic, but the most important thing was that he was able to bear the uncomfortable truth. He was able to bring out what was hidden. So the emperor asked if the mother of our hero will not deign to explain how this could even happen. Is it so hard to live up to the status? Our hero's mother was very worried, so the emperor did not question her. There was no point. He turned to his man, Gina, and asked how much money is allocated for the maintenance of the castles of concubines at all, because why does this happen at your event? He said, however, that he had given an excellent order to distribute the budget equally, and everything was carried out according to the order. The emperor could not understand what the word equally was at all. He also asked to bring the report, and as quickly as he could. Our hero looked at this and understood that his father was determined, and that he himself would look with pleasure at the figures that would be in the report. Our hero's mother wanted to say that a mistake had occurred, so he asked his little one back. However, it was our hero who realized that this chance was the only one for all of them. While everyone was in turmoil, and the emperor's secretary was handing him the documents, everyone understood what was about to happen. For the emperor realized what was happening, he couldn't even believe it. He used his power to burn the given paper, which surprised our hero very much. After all, our hero could not even think that the emperor was not aware of everything. It was really the fault of the empress. The emperor turned to her and asked what was wrong, because there was a hole in his predecessors and his concubines received almost nothing. But the only thing the empress did was to pretend that she could not believe it. So the emperor, from the side of an incredibly formidable face, he asked, because he did not know that the distribution of the budget is precisely her direct responsibility. The eldest son wanted to stand up for his own, so he came forward at the same moment to express his own point of view. He said that this was some kind of misunderstanding, because the empress certainly would not have done such a thing. However, the emperor became even more formidable. He said that there was no difference, because it was the leader who was responsible for the mistakes of his subordinates. It was because of her negligence that his younger brother was left hungry and naked. The older son looked at our hero with very guilty eyes, which definitely did not like it there. Our first floor showed that the eldest son Kajais has neither the charisma of the emperor nor the cunning of the empress. So the father asked him, the eldest son, if he wanted to say that his mother had nothing to do with it. So at the same moment the emperor went up to the empress and said he was very disappointed in her. The mistress began to tell the emperor not to blame her, because it was all her fault. She was the one who was wrong. The emperor could not understand what he was talking about at all. What mistake? Because there she sat down and gave birth to the emperor's child. It is enough to be considered a member of the imperial family. Lady blushed a little, and the emperor touched her hand, because she should already understand that she must be aware of its status in society. It was this picture has caused not a good reaction from the empress to all find the culprits and bring them to justice. He said that such mistakes he would not tolerate more. At this point the empress looked at the floor, her hands trembling very much, but still said that she would make sure that this would never happen again. The emperor looked at her once more and warned for the very last time that she would be punished next time. She continued to apologize, for surely she would find the culprit and punish him severely, but still she did not understand why he was so furious with her. At the same moment the empress came up and said that she did not know how it happened. She did not even know how to justify herself to the mother of our hero. Our hero at this time understood that she was pretending, even though the mother of our hero worried a lot and also said that no mistake, no, the empress is not to blame. The protagonist could not understand in any way what his mother was doing, for surely the very snake who knew everything about everything was standing in front of them. The empress said that this would never happen again, but only our hero understood that you should at least put a guilty face, because all these women, she just intimidated her power. It was at this point our hero's birthday came to an end, and the hole in the budget was patched up. Not even the empress was involved in it. They quickly found the culprit. It was a family of minor aristocrats. It was them who were made guilty and then without any special proceedings simply took and executed. In the palace the servants discussed the fact that at the end of the investigation the aristocrats had even admitted their guilt, but they could not imagine where they were going to spend such a huge sum of money. Everyone was glad that everything was resolved, but only our hero realized that the real culprit, or rather the man, had escaped punishment. The case was closed immediately. He thought that all this is incredibly unfair, but as soon as he grows up, he will definitely powder everyone else. Well, while he has not yet grown, his body really wanted to eat, so the only thing he could do was to cry. At this point our hero was already being spoon-fed. He was happy with his current life. However, he was still thinking that he needed to work on his body, for he was going to be a baby for a long time to come. However, after some thought, he realized that all he had to do was eat and play. And after he had eaten, he decided it was time to sleep. Enough time passed, our hero woke up, and a carriage drove up to his house. He noticed that several people came out of the carriage. He could see this, for he flew up to the window while his babysitter was asleep. He heard 3 people coming into his room, one of them his mother, and more footsteps of an adult and a child. Our hero forgot about the babysitter and was afraid that if he woke up, everything would see his power. He flew towards the nanny as quickly as possible, and as soon as the adults entered the room, they saw our hero pinching the nanny's cheeks. The mistress, seeing this picture, shouted for our hero to stop hurting the nanny, because the nanny must be loved and obeyed. At this point, the nanny herself noticed that another mistress had also arrived. She immediately greeted her, for I immediately spotted her. However, the mistress who had just arrived at the castle asked not to apologize, because she herself had not warned anyone about the visit. Our hero remembered that it was another concubine, Finalia. Everyone began to say that if they had known about the visit earlier, everyone could have met her, but the mistress said she wanted to talk to our hero's mother privately. Our hero's mother, however, could not understand why you came to see her at all, yet she thought the conversation would be serious. But at this point, while our hero's mother was waiting for something serious, she choked on her tea. But Finalia herself asked for forgiveness because she did not behave appropriately at the banquet in honor of Prince Ariel's birthday. She looked like she was really sorry. Before us sat finally a Kansas, in the not-so-distant past, in the midst of the fighting on the continent, it was her family that had contributed most to the victory. There was no one in the empire who had not heard of her family, but that was a thing of the past now. So due to the fact that recently no boys were born in the family, and glory quickly faded. It was rumored that they were very tight in funds in the past few years, so the madam asked if she had come to her because of problems in the family, so she said they were really in debt. Phanelia remembers the Empress forcing her to do something, so it was most likely her family was to blame for the hole in the finances. It was at this point that Phanelia pulled out her bag of money and said that at least it wasn't enough to solve the problem, but that she was really sorry. She wanted our hero's mother to know that, even though she was not forgiven, she said that our hero's mother might hate her badly and also in the family. At that moment the door to the room opened, and not noticed in the distance was the daughter of Phanelia standing there, so the mistress understood that she only wanted to protect her child from conflict with the other members of the imperial family. So the mistress said that she was fine, she did not need all this, for she believed that the person in front of her was certainly not guilty of anything. Phanelia asked me not to feel sorry for her, but the mistress said I did not. She said bluntly that at that point they had no need to antagonize each other. She understands everything and does not hold a grudge against their family. She held out the bag of money back and said that it is better to use it, or rather find the money to buy a gift for her little daughter. After all, she understands exactly why they kept the expenses in their palaces. She is not sure, but most likely it was the fact that our hero's mother was a servant to the Empress. But our hero was simply shocked when he heard this information. So now it became clear to him why his mother was so disliked. He began to roll about his room, thinking that his mother had a very difficult life, and the nurse couldn't even understand what she had to do to calm down our hero at that moment. She asked him if he was okay. Our hero noticed that she was worried, so he put a happy face on his face and knew what to do to make him not shake. Nanny realized that the young prince is just a fickle mood. So Nanny left to do a little exercise with Princess Kania. Noticing that everyone was occupied with something else, our hero decided to use his energy once again to listen to the conversation between his mother and Phanelia. The conversation had already been about what my mother had said, that she could not hide from the oppression of the Empress. So that was why she had decided that as long as Arel was not grown up, she would protect him and would not allow him to harm her family anymore. At this moment she was more serious than ever. She offered to be friends with Lady Phanelia. All, or rather not the two were rising, something more than a conspiracy, a union of the powers of the concubines. At this point, you do not understand that even if someone suddenly finds himself cornered, at least there will be a helping hand. That's what this union is for. And our hero was in confusion because he could not even imagine that his mother turned out to know everything. She even knew about the conflict between the Empress and the concubines. However, what will she do next? 100 years to prepare for all this in advance. While he was thinking, at that moment the very same girl approached him. He could not understand where she had come from. He asked fate to keep it from sticking to him, but all she did was crawl into his bed and start to tell you cheeks she really liked it, was a toy to squeeze. I started hurting the cribs, so our hero hoped that the one would save him. She the cat, running up to pick at first that our hero was actually cute. Our hero realized that all was lost, and the nanny kept saying, will the princess visit? The princess of course said yes, she would love to visit him, and our hero couldn't find any help anywhere. And time went on, and now the prince will be 30 months old. Soon it will be his 3rd birthday. Life seemed to him unbelievably fleeting, in principle, as always. How did it happen that he grew up so quickly? After all, even if they think so, he still has to live to adulthood, to learn at last a normal when girls. He remembered his 45th life, not even hoping to repeat it. But at that very moment the princess walked into his room. She ran to meet him, but our hero decided to hide. But even though he tried, the princess quickly found him. He was upset and depressed, but the princess just wanted to play hide and seek with him. Our hero wanted to refuse, but the princess had already fled. She ran to a larger place. They went outside, and we understand that after the visit of that very mistress, the princess came to them very much. Not without Nanny's help, however, but still he did not see anything wrong in this, for only through this can they form a strong friendship. All the time Kania said that our hero is very lucky to have such a good sister. Even though Todd is still small, but you can take care of him, but when he grows up, he will have to take care of her. She asked for a promise that he would come as soon as this one. But the little prince couldn't understand, because why is that one so obsessive in his direction? But as soon as he thought about it, Kania confessed that she just adores him, because compared to Leonidas, or Merle for that matter, it is much more fun to play with Errol, because he is the best option. Errol laughed awkwardly, because he thought that as soon as she grew up she would regret those words. The princess had already taken him in her arms and said that it was time to play. She would even carry him to the place. However, the girl did not understand that our hero was about to suffocate from such assistance. He asked for help, but of course, as fate would have it, the princess was told that the prince must be in pain when he was carried like this. This maid asked our hero to give it to her because even the princess should not have carried the heavy things, she was still a child. But our hero thanked fate because he was saved. Princess Kania was not happy, she shouted that she wanted to play. But even so, the maid said she could go and draw or listen to a classic. She said she was very tired of it all, it was just boring. She wanted to swing a sword because she had seen her brother Kyle do it. Our hero, noticing that she was practicing with a stick, realized that the center of gravity was displaced. There was no balance even considering the fact that she was holding the most common wood in his hands. And our hero himself loved fencing very much, he even missed that feeling. The princess imagined that her opponent was knocked down, the victory was awarded to her. However, the maid decided to say that, which really upset her, because brother Kyle and Leonid were allowed, so why not her? But to this the maid said only that the princess must not soil her hands, and asked her not to argue with her, because that was the custom. She said that above all the princess should be elegant and feminine, but she had already noticed that she was missing her sword. She noticed that her sword was already in the princess's hands. The maid ran to her, talking about it being a sword, but Princess Kania was only talking about swordsmanship. The maid ran after her, asking her to give her the sword as well, or rather just to take a smaller one since she wanted it so much. And our hero stood there with a contented, apparently he liked his little sister Kania more and more each time. Our hero had already turned 5 years old, at which point he was already learning how to ride a horse. But to tell the truth, he was still riding a toy horse. After all, he was still a child. He was asked, doesn't he want to ride a real horse? But our prince's only answer was that he only wanted to ride his own because it wasn't dangerous at all. I did not say that all boys should be interested in horses or swords, and it is time he did. She was very worried about him that he will become like everyone else, but our hero smiled broadly and said that you put away such thoughts because the prince on a white horse is a relic of the past. Nanny was sorry to see it like that, but there was nothing she could do about it. Our hero here thought and realized that of all the lives he had lived, he had not absorbed in the proper world and only one knowledge of how to bring people to their white knees. He had achieved perfect swordsmanship while slaying quite a few opponents, and he had also excelled in the field of magic, all his obstacles in his path, every skill he had honed to perfection, that now he simply had nothing better to do. Still, there was nothing she could do about it. She wished him to work well, to work productively. Well, as soon as the door closed and our hero was out of sight, he immediately laid down on the bed, because only losers should work, not him. Our hero was constantly crying, constantly pushing pity while trying to calm down. Then we realized that the only thing our hero didn't want to do was just study. Even though he was 5 years old, the very time when you have to learn the world around you from every angle. However, he asked him if he did not want to know anything, because there is enough of the other side, he just was not interested. I, in turn, turned to him and said something like that, as if he had lived his 100th life. This surprised him a little, because I could not find out that way. Our hero said it wasn't like that and immediately laid down on the arm of his chair. He said he had had enough, she was already all over him, for the case was sick of learning over and over again, and so every time. At this point his nanny took him to the library and told him that according to the imperial law, 5 years old is the age at which it should start learning. So she brought him, looked at all these books and couldn't understand why there were so many of them at all. Would he really have to count them all? So as soon as our hero took the books in his hands he started spinning them. That's the only thing he liked to do with them. You have to read it's not spinning, so I tried again. Our hero, while picking up the books, began to build houses with them, which brought the nanny out again. She said that she has the opportunity that many want to learn and cannot, yet our hero is still able to begin to learn. She said that he needs to respect books and stop spoiling. She told Toth to sit up straight, yet the only thing our hero was thinking about was how to take from his room. He figured out exactly how to do it. That is the skill he learned in his new life. He lay down on the floor and began to cry about not wanting to learn. However, as soon as his mother entered his room, the very concert that he had arranged took place and ended, he ended up having to sit down and start reading. He knew he should have started learning by now, but ironically, the more he tried, the more he endangered the people around him. You are the more talented son of a concubine and the emperor, the sooner they will want to get rid of him. Although this may seem unfair to many, but fate has already decided everything for everyone. So our hero thought only that she simply had no other choice but to take everything in her downtrodden hands. He began to drool, so Nanny asked him not to be distracted, and he was trying not only for himself, but for his mistress. Our hero asked, trying to get it out in the open, if he could learn at all, because he thought he was too lazy. But the nurse said only that if he continued to be lazy like that, then he would upset his mother, which is exactly what he did not want in his new life. So he realized that he would have to study hard. He would study everything but fencing, or he would definitely get a knife in the rib, and he wouldn't want to learn magic either. I wonder what she would even grow up to be if she didn't do anything like that. However, in spite of all his hopes, a week later, he was told by his nanny that he came to teach our hero magic. Our hero cried out because he did not want to be a magician, but what will happen if it is a strong magician? He will definitely have to feel in power. You now in him a huge amount of energy that he has accumulated these years. He wanted to at least somehow hide his abilities. However, the nanny did not let him do anything. She already led him by the hand and told him not to be afraid because everything will pass quickly and painlessly. So as soon as our hero entered the hall, he immediately saw the teacher with an incredibly surprised face. Our hero could see the tech lemon all over the body of the mage standing in front of him, but I wonder how he saw him. At the same moment the teacher came up and started touching our hero. He was saying that our hero was special. To me, they were already hoping that their prince is especially a child who has an incredible future waiting for him. However, the teacher said that everything is not in a pleasant way. He does not feel the mana in our hero at all. I did not say that this cannot be, but even though I touched him, he could not find a single drop of mana. Our hero laughed. He said that it is useless, because on the way there, he carefully curtailed the circulation of his mother and then concentrated it in one point and spit out all the energy out. Seeing the maid's reaction to his appearance, he was immediately able to shut up in relief. He just can't see mana if she's not there. However, this all had its disadvantages. The master said that since our hero has no propensity to be a mage, then he is definitely Tekova to become me. Information that commoners can often have a bit of mana, but it is our hero who does not have it. Our hero is not left whether he does the right thing, because he ended up only disappointing his mother. He thought that it was necessary, because everyone must think that he is a weak, incapable of anything baby. He tried to apologize to his mother in his mind for being such an incompetent son. They also had a fencing teacher in the house, his new mentor. He said that if our hero trained hard, he would become as strong as he was. Our hero understood him to be a young knight of about 25 years old, no more. He saw that the thickness of a real dog, because for 100 his life, he had already been in an incredible number of battles. His body was hardened in battles with the most terrible creatures that the knight had not even dreamed. So who is standing in front of our hero that dares to teach him? At the same moment our hero asked the Ranful to start training. He wanted him to teach him, but at the moment he thought he was not even his equal. His teacher told our hero to trust him. If exactly he put in a lot of effort, he would definitely become incredibly strong. They asked to start the basics, but our hero remembered that his friend, Princess Kania, wears a weighting device on herself to increase her physical abilities. But the knight said that for their family this is quite normal, so what should our hero do? Ranful started with the basics, saying that the basic things for fencing are flexibility and balance. So he asked about the simplest thing, and also asked not to worry. He put our hero on a stump and told him to stand straight. But our hero began to show that it was incredibly difficult and that he thought he was about to fall. He said to the height not to control anything, so at the same moment they began to practice flexibility. This, too, did not work out for our hero, and only then did the knight decide that they should already try to handle the sword training fee accuracy, where again our hero showed a very poor result. So he asked his mentor, is he really that talentless? But the knight said not to worry, because this is only the first training. Only through practice they will be able to cope together. But at this point, while our hero is talking to his mentor, he noticed that he is being followed. He realized that the more mediocre his results, the sooner they will get away from him at all. Well, as we know, rumors spread very quickly, so in a moment, everyone was saying that our hero has no more mana than just an ice flow. And that's what everyone was talking about. One man, who most likely was watching our hero, said that our hero's body was so weak that he could barely stand on his feet, even reporting that he had no talent for swordsmanship. The Empress was pleased to hear this, but only our hero understood that rumors could calm his guard. At the same time, while our hero was eating his food, he asked when his teacher would come. But the nanny replied that it would not be long. He realized that now everyone is saying that he is a useless prince. Almost all the teachers refused to teach him, and yet he found a hero who decided to come. A man named Gamal Pernia came, and today he became our hero's new teacher. He will teach him foreign languages. Our hero looked at him and noticed one thing on his face, only despair. Most likely he was forced. At the same moment a lot of books were thrown on the table to our hero. He said it was just the basics of grammar in one day. He said that this was the normal pace of study because tomorrow they were already planning to move on to a new topic. Our hero didn't understand what was wrong with him at all, so he decided to pretend not to try his best. He did not understand why the teacher kept mashing him up, even though he would not ask for an opinion. Was the teacher going to just ignore him in every class? Even though our hero was incredibly small, it was in languages that he was savvy. He had learned too many languages in all his past lives, so his linguistic abilities might well be considered great. To begin with, he decided to find a dictionary, a grammar book, and some more foreign literature. There was so much to see in the world, and the languages were all made up on a similar principle, so it was only a matter of time before the teaching was done. All the night our hero spent reading books. In the morning our hero was asked how he even lied that he had learned all the material, but our hero said it was all true. Should he start? The teacher was shocked, but our hero understood that compared to the languages of neighboring countries, his native imperial was still a bit difficult. The teacher asked him to read his book which he was about to open to him. The young prince kept thinking that no matter how much a child could do, reading even one simple book before the age of 12 was difficult. Our hero at the same moment began to read, which surprised the teacher, because if a student succeeds, then the reputation of teachers increases. He chose what he could afford to be a genius of the highest order. At this point, the whole country was plunged into shock, because the prince is not only not able to use, so he did not know how to use magic, he did not have it at all. So how could such a fool as a prince was able to learn languages in just 2 days? At the same moment, everyone thought that our hero is just a genius, and the source of dryness was the fact that the teacher, a little drunk, began to talk about what he had seen at first glance. Finally the rumors reached the emperor. He realized that if the sword or magic is not his sitting, it is not easy to do with his favorite thing. He even thought he was truly a genius. But only the mistress spoke of her regret that she and her son had grieved him. She noticed that her son had changed a great deal. Was she even raising him correctly? The emperor noticed the excitement on his concubine's face and approached her. He asked her if she was really worried about him. For the emperor thinks our hero is growing up to be an incredible boy, and here our hero saw the whole picture. He said he would still show the wonders of the world, but they are better shown in doses to maintain interest in his person. And while he is still a boy, he can relax and reap his benefits, for now he is a genius from now on. A few days later he was allocated many nights in the court. Surely it was the emperor who decided that he should be protected, for our hero did not know how to fight. He loved that he had such a caring father emperor, but at the same moment he was distracted by a very loud sound. It was the nannies who brought something very heavy. Our hero wondered what it was all about. So at the same moment his mother told him that they were gifts from the emperor himself. He was surprised that his father had given him so many gifts, but when he opened it he noticed there was only jewelry. All these will be precious gifts from the emperor himself, but our hero was interested only in a pendant because it seems that it helps to concentrate and activate mental abilities. But most likely, this thing just boils your brain and makes you very tired. All the babysitters were delighted with our hero, for they read him incredibly well. Our heroes understood that most likely they see the object only as a pendant, while he sees Manu inside the stone. He had no use for it though. He even thought of giving it all to his little sister, for she's been training too hard lately to be a real orangutan any longer. Our hero turned to his mother and asked her if he could give this thing to his little sister, and the lady herself didn't mind, because if he gave one thing, they wouldn't lose anything. He was asked what he liked about Princess Kania in the first place, so he couldn't think of anything better to say than that she was just very strong. It was a happy day for all the inhabitants of the castle, for it was the day that the emperor lavishly bestowed upon the prince. Our hero sat at the table, his nanny serving him desserts, pastries from the best chefs. But our hero tasted everything and realized that it's not that, everything is not that. Because everything that was on his table had no taste at all, because they were not sweet at all. He didn't ask me if I should call the chef or not. Our hero, after a little silence, said to call the alchemist. The nanny was shocked by this statement, but our hero was only thinking about getting a Coca-Cola or chocolate. That is why he needed the alchemist to recreate this flavor. Not of course he couldn't read minds, so he asked, why did he even need an alchemist? At this point he realized that even if he tried to explain, she wouldn't be able to understand anything, because it would be strange for a 5-year-old child to demand an alchemist. Still, to recreate the very taste he had had in his past life, the very taste he liked, without the alchemist's help was simply unrealistic and impossible. He had no idea how to process products to get the taste of the same cola, because there is no such technology in this world anyway. And our hero is so eager to drink such a cool, carbonated drink. Well, how should he achieve this? However, since he's a genius, he'll think of something. He immediately ran out the door saying that he went to study. I even thought she heard that, because she certainly did not expect to hear that from our hero. He understood that cooking is chemistry, and he definitely needs an alchemist to try it. 3 years later, when our hero was already 8 years old, he was already sitting in some meeting about how everyone was planning to build new bridges in the areas where the traders moved. Our hero was asked, what did he think of that? He thought it was just great, and also asked who designed that bridge in the first place. At one point, the man said he was the one who built it. He was glad, for he thought our hero was praising him. But despite the joy on our hero's face, which was replaced by despair, he said that if he ever brought such a screw up again, he would fire him. He said that everything looked good. But even so, in winter snow would accumulate and everything would immediately collapse to hell. He said that the construction was unreliable, because if it was overloaded in one place, it would be very unsafe for citizens who would use the bridge. He said that despite the fact that the master had invested in decorations and pompous, but did not think about safety as well as the most important function of the bridge. He said that everyone began to refine the bridge. At this point it was made clear to us that because of his extensive knowledge, our hero had a lot of work to do at this point. After all, he was only advising ministers, using knowledge of technology from his other lives. It all seemed great, after all, 8 years of advising the officials themselves. But where would our hero go? After all, now is the time to show off his skills, so he immediately started on the next problem. At that moment, while our hero went outside, he was noticed by a new maid. She called our hero a sage with silver hair. This nickname was very shocking to our hero, because he did not expect to be called so at all. He asked where this nickname came from, so he asked her not to call him that from now on. The maid wanted to call him that one more time, but then she thought better of it. This embarrassed him a little, but people still came up with a stupid nickname for him, which turned out to be incredibly lame. Our hero's mother couldn't understand where our hero had even gone, but Nanny replied that he had requested an audience with the emperor himself. He said he wanted to study alchemy. Our hero, as he sat in the carriage, realized that since the emperor responded so quickly, it meant that he had achieved a special favor. After all, he really works hard for the good of the empire. So even if he confessed, he would be right, for even with so many lives under his belt, he was nervous during their conversation with his father. Of course, because he had to be as eloquent as possible, making sure that everything he wanted sounded unobtrusive. At this point, he was already in his father's study. He was talking about how he should bring the empire train with all his might. He even had the opportunity to do so in the field of alchemy. Since he is not strong in swordsmanship or the magical arts, all that is left to him is science. The emperor watched and understood that our hero, though a hammer, is a very sensible head on his shoulders. He said that he would provide his son teachers of alchemy, but if still what he wants. Our hero, however, has already asked everything he has only dreamed of. In fact, after it was announced that Prince Ale needed a teacher of alchemy, that is, candidates lined up. For them it was an opportunity to leave their mark on history. So a test assignment was set to create a mirror which can reflect the sunlight to the horizon. Soon there appeared the very man who coped with the task perfectly. A true connoisseur of alchemy, the name of this lucky man was Darman Langet. Our hero was also happy and thought that he had to some old grandfather. However, they sent such a young teacher who had a strange hair color. Our hero asked if it was a natural color, but Darman said that because of his many experiments with chemical elements, he breathed all kinds of crap, so that's why they turned white. Our hero wondered how he had survived at all if he was sniffing these elements all the time. He was sure that outwardly he was calm, but it was only a mask. Because alchemy is a ruthless thing, so if he got hurt or died while researching, there would be no one to blame. His teacher also told him that the study of alchemy is actually quite a dangerous occupation. It is the kind of science whose study can pay a very high price. Our hero said that he had already weighed all the risks and that alchemy is not the science of magic. He does not expect him to teach him how to make gold from lead, because he just wants to explore things like metal alloys, such as finding the strongest of them, or to create a material that will make it easier to build houses. At this point the master was thrilled, for this meant that the rumors were not lying. The prince was in fact different from everyone else. He was in fact the very genius who would one day lead their empire. So at that very moment, Darman knelt before him. What do you say? Right to his eyes, he said that she was teaching him all that she knew himself. It had been several days first studying alchemy. Darman asked, did our hero really study before that with alchemy himself? Even the hero could not understand in any way, because is it so obvious, so he told his teacher that he just read a couple of books. The teacher was glad, because he realized that the rumors weren't lying, and our hero was glad that he didn't suspect anything. At this point I did not continue my experiments until the evening. Darman all the time helped our hero to make the right decision. So now our hero knew how to extract lead and other chemicals, with the exception of metals or maps. Everything else was identical, which he already knew. However, it was not much of a difference, come to experience. Everything went according to plan, but at one point a petition came to the emperor from his son. His son decided to expand the staff to 4 alchemists. The emperor immediately asked that the best alchemists in the empire be assembled. His servant worried, for what was the little prince going to do with these alchemists? For they were spending the empire's budget on their research. The people might begin to resent them. But the emperor remembered his son's words. He remembered how sure he was of this. He understood that his son was working for the sake of the empire. However, our hero told the chemist that he would want to invent a drink through alchemy. This invention no one could understand, because how our hero, with such an incredible brain, as well as the knowledge, spent his intense creation of some drink. Many people were upset, because they left their previous jobs for this. But our hero asked them not to worry, because he will pay them all more than enough, no matter whether they will succeed in this business or fail. So at that very moment, all the alchemists began to say that they would help everyone. Many had heard that such a development already existed. However, did the prince really want something of his own? Our hero understood that he had E100, which was an incredible motivation, money and fame. Those were the two things that would work for him. So we would have to hurry up and make some awesome soda. A few days later they had already had mineral water brought to them from abroad, so they had samples. One of the men wondered if it was really drinkable because it didn't look all that good. But our hero was sure that for the time being it could not be. What was it in front of him? However, if natural water is not good enough for him, they will create artificial water. It was all alchemists, because they could not understand how you can create artificial water, so our hero gave them the leaflets and said he had come up with a theory. He asked them to evaluate it and refine it, so he was already waiting for them at the next meeting. He believed that his alchemists were the best. At this point, our hero ran, because it was time to test the theory in practice. But would a week be enough? However, he was still sure that money was the best motivation for alchemists. Within a week, our hero gathered all the alchemists, because this very discovery was to turn the empire upside down. He said that the trend that season would be carbonated water, the very fuel of progress. He understood that most likely the alchemists would not be able to create any analog of soda, so he decided to try water. Many people asked if anyone would try it, because somehow he didn't feel like trying it all. However, our hero asked to trust him. He asked to mix it all with fruit juice or alcohol. He understood that he originally wanted Coca-Cola, but it was unlikely that he would be able to create this unique flavor. So they had a few copies. He decided to test how good were those. As soon as he mixed the lemon juice together with that very water, he immediately realized that it just tasted incredible. At this point, everyone was just thrilled with it. All the alchemists couldn't believe the taste. So the prince's lemonade sold out incredibly quickly outside the empire. It gained its popularity just fleetingly. It gained the status of an expensive drink and became a luxury for the nobility. No one could even believe that it was created by the same prince. Everyone was glad, because it was the very gift who wanted to get at least a drink. At this time, Count Dement, lord of the northern part of the empire, wanted to know the author, or rather to find out the truth. Was it the prince? So his secretary, you have already said that they say that the process of creation was managed personally by Ariel himself. His drink became an object of luxury because it was a huge contribution to the economy of the empire. Rumor has it that wagons of gold constantly flocked to the castle of the concubine. The count thought this was his mistake, for he thought the prince in question was no different from most children. If only he had known, he would have sprung for it at once. And now all he has to do is elbow chair. By this time the princess was 16 years old. She was showing her skills. There he loved it all. He said that the one was very cool, and the maid also praised her, saying and then that they're incredibly professional fencing. This was very true, because she was much better than most guys her own age. He thought she was cute, but it was still worth a break. The princess sat down at the table and said she had heard too much about him lately, for his miracle water had spread not only throughout the empire but beyond. She said that here is just the perfect son of the emperor. He cannot even imagine how people are jealous of his mother. Our heroes understood that all this development he just dedicated to his mother, Liff and Einrest, because I used to be a family. Einrest belonged to the nobility, but in the near future promised. They have only the title and a small house, but they are actually in the form of a life of the commoner. So our hero, learning about the unfortunate fate of his family, decided to help. He allocated them a share in his soda business, and he certainly did not lose, because everyone stopped in line. Everyone wanted to buy it triple the price. Further, he created a yogurt and sodium glutamate, which quickly became a hit of sales. The finances of their family rose to the sky. Now no company with them could not compare. It was this luxury that shone through his eyes. The princess also had tears running down her eyes, and our hero thought something was a little on the fritz. So he decided that he would bring her some lemonade and waffles, for he is a treat. But to this, the princess only put her sword to our hero's throat and said that she actually has plenty of money too, but our hero never learned how to hold a sword. She decided that our hero should learn how to hold a sword. Our hero pretended that he would learn, but in his grave he had seen all this learning. At the same moment he started just repeating what he had been taught, but without much enthusiasm. He thought that she would get away from him as quickly as possible. But in fact he sees how his little sister strived for his dream. The desire to become a better warrior and confidently hold a sword in his hands moved the fragile little girl, and eventually became so strong. So our hero will have to use a little himself, but to confront her, he began training. At the same moment we realize that probably some time has already passed after the training. So our hero was already in the carriage. All the people met him. So many people recognized him, especially he even felt like a star. He was a local idol. It was all cool. However, why did the emperor summon him? Does he want to reward him for the work he did? Because before his silence made him feel nervous. Saint, however, he is used to it now, so he sat down at the table and began to eat all the goodies. He is so used to his father that he feels at home. However, while he was tasting all the food, his father offered him a crazy thing. He offered to become someone who has a full-fledged public office. Our hero could not believe his ears, for he did not expect it to be so soon. And the emperor went on, saying that it would take some time, but he was sure that no one would come back against such a candidacy. Our hero, in turn, said that he should not yet, because he is not yet ready for life in the palace and responsibilities. He calmly drank some tea and confessed that he did not even know how to react to the quarrelsome offer, because he still has much to develop in alchemy. He is not sure of anything. After all, either would be. I forgot the emperor gave him a post as his first son and heir. After all, the empresses and the heir have been quieter than water, lower than grass of late, which is why he has kept a line that he dare not cross. They still do not see him as any kind of threat, because he lives without incident. There is a difference between attracting the emperor's attention and openly fighting for the throne. He is not yet ready to fight with his brothers and sisters for a place to be the crown prince, or vice versa. Does the emperor deliberately provoke him? Is it really so? Everyone should understand that natural selection is not only in nature, in the human world, it also works to the full. The same struggle for power with a comma in which the strongest survive and the weakest perish. However, why do such questions about the life of death now at all? He did not need anything, because it has long been of no interest to him. Our hero was already riding his horse at this time. It was the first time he had ever strayed so far from the castle. He loved that feeling of freedom. After all, he had been working too much lately. He never even thought he would turn into such an office rat. After all, he used to roam the world looking for the strongest opponent. He was tortured by such nostalgia, so while there was time, he had to enjoy his freedom to the fullest. He rode along with his sister, for in fact this ride was so much thanks to her. She did not know that our hero was such a good rider, but at one point asked why the whole platoon was following them, because they had a look on their face that said they were ready to rip someone. But to me replied that she said that it would be enough, but our hero only laughed and said that with freedom in recent times more and more difficult. At this point, while our hero was laughing, he noticed some strange aura in the forest in front. He was even told that there is a monster. He got that feeling, for the usual water is ugly faithful. He told them to stick some traps. Everyone went forward already in spite of the warnings of our hero, but the man said that the princess herself uses that forest for training. This very much surprised him. Why so? Is not she afraid? He remembered the moment when his sister had proposed to him to go for a ride. They were sitting at the table at that moment. She asked him if our hero was not tired of sitting and working all day in the castle. She was sure that it would be fun there, but only now our hero realized that his sister is sick, even though something thought adventures was something cool, and today it was just that. For no matter how dangerous it was, still our hero went along with her, because he believes in her. Our hero at home was that Balda, but she had too much power. Their plan was that some of the knights would act as bait. He, princess, and the rest of the squad goes to the rear to deal with monsters. They said with ice that the princess herself will sort out it all, even though there were 20 orcs. But our hero sees the orcs for the first time, healthy as it would be. But their team was much cooler, because not only the princess's ball skills, but also her reflex speed is simply impressive. Her unwavering aura, emanating from his image, encouraged all present, and the battle continued until the night. Our hero asked her how she was feeling, if she was all right. It had been a long time since she'd let off steam. However, still asked not in front of the heart, because if a man cool, he would be ripped off, just like him in one life. While the princess was incredibly tasty, he noticed that she was still a child, nothing more. However, he asked her, so why did it make her want it more? Got a little sad and told the whole story. She said that since childhood, all they say is that the princess should not swing a sword. People think something there's just a dope wash, and then she'll get tired of swordsmanship. Like, she'll marry a man she doesn't even know and settle down. She became very sad, so our hero realized that marriage of convenience here was the norm for the aristocrats, and in any case will have to vouch for someone who will keep the family afloat in high society. She said she hated it all. She wanted to live like our hero. She wanted to earn money and authority, doing what she was good at. To try for the good of the empire and get recognition from people. Here, for example, our hero is already recognized on the street, so she also wants to beauty her family not by marriage, but by merit, which no one can deny. She wants to control her own destiny. Our hero looked at her and said he thought she must be the way. She said that our hero is a very good brother, so she said that at dawn will not return to the castle. In the distance above the moon a dragon appeared, and everyone continued to talk without noticing him. In an attempt to overpower Kania, the orc plucked one of the trees in the forest from the ground and with a terrible roar rushed to attack the princess. With one precise strike of her sword, she mortally wounds him. Several slain orcs already lie around her, and the guards are not unafraid of the princess, admitting that she has nearly defeated them all and that the knights had better not get under her arm, for she is doing a fine job herself. They even pity the orcs. As Kania kills the 2 orcs in one blow, Errol calls her over and asks her to finish, for she must hurry to get back in time. With a radiant smile, he meets her surprised gaze. She got carried away again and didn't notice it. Kania wasn't too upset, all her opponents were throwing up anyway. After a short pause, pleased with herself, she agreed to depart. Unfortunately, her horse looked slumped, and when she saw it, she was surprised. Errol suggested that he was simply tired and that he should not be ridden. The prince suggested that his sister ride one horse, while the princess' own horse would be examined by experts. Joyful brother and sister sat together, and Kania would lead because, in Errol's opinion, the little sister was the best with horses. And he was still shorter than her, so he simply wouldn't be able to handle a horse sitting behind it. They raced across the green meadow, ahead of their many guards. Suddenly Errol noticed something. They stopped. A worried Kania tried to ask him what was wrong. He saw something in the sky, or rather, he didn't see it, he felt an aura. Something was lurking behind the clouds, something huge and obviously dangerous. It was a wyvern. Before anyone realized what was going on, Errol snatched his sister's bridles from his horse and yelled for her to hold on tight. Drawing the knight's attention, the prince reported the creature in the sky and ordered the guards to flee at a scattered pace. The dazed guards could not believe it. They saw no one. They stayed where they were and tried to convince Errol that there could be no such creatures in the training area. The fact is that the emperor had once hunted wyverns and there could be nothing like it here. While one of the knights was saying this, the creature grabbed him and lifted him over the heads of the rest of the group, accompanied by frightened looks. The men were now in a panic and tried to run away from several wyverns. While everyone looked around and wondered where so many had come from, Errol chased his horse and rescued him and his sister. They watched as the knights tried to fight or flee. Some were swallowed by the wyverns, some were crushed with powerful clawed paws. It was then that it became clear to the prince that this was more than a hunt, it was a slaughter. The wyverns had released poisonous gas. It would seem that they are strong enough as it is, so why make them poisonous too? Many soldiers were already lying on the ground. Poor Kania, she had lost many men. Errol ordered her not to be distracted. Her job was to hold on so they could escape. The wyvern chasing them had already begun releasing poisonous gas when one of the mages sent a fireball at it. An order was given to protect the princess. There were too many wyverns for them to hide. The situation was dire. Since wyverns are resistant to magic up to class 4, most mages couldn't even scratch them. The wyverns circled above the prince and princess. Errol had no choice but to use mana. He used it as bullets. Folding his arm in the shape of a pistol, he fired, and one of the wyverns fell to the ground. Another one should have been brought down. So pretending it wasn't his job, Errol thanked the mages for their labors. He let the horse go on, just as suddenly a wyvern came down in front of him. Errol and Kania were startled. Who knows what would have become of them had it not been for the blonde-haired girl knight who slayed the wyvern with a single blow. She ordered them to flee immediately to safety. The guardswoman sent them into the woods. Errol thought the girl was really good. She would buy him and his sister some time. He rushed forward. There was a terrifying battle behind them. They had already reached the forest and suddenly they heard a voice laughing at the wretched people. The prince stopped his horse and, looking around, asked what it was. In response, he heard an angry laugh coming from a dark aura. There stood a man in a long black cloak. He held a staff in his hand, and even his face was hard to see. Errol repeated the question forcefully, demanding to know who stood before him. Examining the stranger, the prince decided that the staff in his hand was highly suspicious. Errol rudely asked what the cloaked man wanted, to which he received only a smirk. The man became serious again, pointed the staff at his brother and sister, and cast a spell of magical volley. Now there was only one question in Errol's mind. The mage spell was strong. It hit most of the troops. Errol reacted instantly and turned his horse so that he and Kania were not hit. He turned around and saw that many knights had fallen dead, smoke billowing from them. The mage praised Kania for her ability to run, though it was to Errol's credit. Kania was frightened. Errol, on the other hand, was more focused and wary, so why did the mage know his sister and was he really targeting her in the first place? The mage laughed and offered the prince and princess some fun. His eyes lit up at those words and his smile grew wider. He raised his staff and a dark aura moved around him. The prince was greatly disturbed by his aura. His sister distracted him from his thoughts by pointing in the direction. He looked where she was looking and saw the dead knights and wyverns rising. From their bodies came this aura. The surviving soldiers were bouncing off the walking dead. The mage ordered the undead to kill the second princess, that is, Kania. He shouted that he would teach the upstarts sitting imposingly on the throne a lesson. The army of the dead moved toward Errol and Kania, and then there was a look of bewilderment in the mage's eyes. Errol held up his index and thumbs again, determined to protect his sister if the mage really came after her. He fired mana bullets directly at the mage, who screamed furiously and fell dead. Kania looked at her brother in surprise and asked what had happened to the mage. The remaining knights wondered the same thing. Errol told his sister that he didn't know and that it was probably a kickback from his own magic. It happens if you use too complex a spell. The mage lay motionless, but the army he had raised was still active, and the knights concentrated vividly and raised their weapons again. The fair-haired girl who had killed the wyvern in front of Errol and Kania told them to run again. A stunned Kania asked her brother why the undead were still moving, for the mage was already dead and the spell must have lost its power. Apparently, the spell was not bound to the mage but was a call for a certain amount of time. They should have left. Errol asked his sister to simply trust him. They were leaving while their army selflessly battled the undead. Already night had fallen. The prince and the princess stopped by the forest beneath the bluff. Errol was trying to build a fire with his sticks and Kania was sitting beside them, worried about what would happen next. Most likely, since the mage was dead, his army should be gone soon, too. Errol reassured his sister the soldiers were probably already looking for them. She said she thought he only knew how to work with his brain and she didn't understand how he had the skills to build a fire. Errol, not stopping to try, smiled and asked not to underestimate brains. He just knows how to use the power of friction. He read it out in a book. The prince wanted to use mana to make a fire, but with Kania looking so intently, it can't be done. His arms were already tired, but he finally did it. He made a fire. Both sat and gazed admiringly at the flames with their mouths open. There was silence, the fire was gradually building, and the excitement was going away. Kania became visibly sad and said she had made a waste of the whole thing. Errol reassured her, for it had been an accident. How could she have known? She asked if he was afraid. He looked worriedly at his sister and knew she was feeling guilty. He shuddered faintly and assured her that he was scared, but since she was around, it was easier to cope with the fear and the wyverns were creepy. She looked at him with pity, believing he was afraid too. Then she moved closer to him, covered his palm with hers and thanked him, for without him this day could have ended in great tragedy. She was trembling with either fear or cold. Errol hadn't noticed before, but she was very frightened. From Kania's words, most of the men who accompanied them died on the battlefield protecting their lives. The imperial family is always in the crosshairs. Sister experienced this for the first time. He was sure it was very hard for her now. They sat around the fire with their arms around each other. Kania closed her eyes, and Errol thought about the fact that they still needed to get home safe and sound somehow. They needed to be on their guard. Suddenly they heard an eerie roar from behind the cliff. Two creatures were fighting in the air over the cliff. Brother and sister jumped up. There seemed to be a griffin fighting a wyvern. Why now? The griffon began to fall, and the wyvern rushed after it. Now Errol noticed a nest in the rock. Apparently the wyvern was hunting for a baby griffon. The griffon was already at the nest when the wyvern grabbed at its throat. The still blind griffon squeaked in the nest, and the fight continued over it. With a piercing scream, the griffon tumbled down, and under its weight, part of the cliff collapsed. Errol reacted quickly and ran screaming, pulling his sister with him, away from the collapsing rocks. They stood at a distance from where the debris in the griffon's body had fallen, the dust swallowing everything around them. They coughed and tried to see something. Fortunately, the wyvern had already flown away. Perhaps it didn't smell them, thanks to the wyvern blood on their bodies. At this point, Errol literally opened his mouth as he didn't find the sister he was talking to nearby. She was already sitting near a griffin piled with rock debris. Errol ran to her asking her to be careful, for it could be dangerous. She reassured him by saying that the griffin was already dead. Errol was upset because she wouldn't listen to him. Kania looked at the griffin's huge body pityingly asking what to do with it. With a slight smile, her brother answered the question by asking if she wanted to bury it. It turned out that the princess was talking about the baby that the griffin had protected at the cost of his life. She was already holding it in her arms and quietly examining the little creature. Errol wondered where she had gotten it and was simply amazed at the sight. He looked suspiciously at the griffon. He didn't want to deal with it, but what can you do, and decided there was nothing left for them to do but. At this point his reasoning was interrupted by the suggestion of keeping the baby. She thought it a very cool and interesting plan, but Errol was not so enthusiastic about it. The blonde-haired girl king called out to them and was glad that the prince and princess were unharmed. Those were standing beside the dead griffin and holding the baby in their arms. The soldiers ran up to them as Kania expressed her joy at seeing them safe and sound. According to the knights, there were no more casualties after the mage's death. At that moment, a griffin voice came up, and, realizing what it was, the fair-haired woman shrieked. Errol said that the knights had come in time because his sister wanted to keep the little griffin. No one could have guessed how it was possible to keep it. A week later, everything had settled down except for one thing: there was a pet in the house. That pet was a baby griffin. He jumped up on Errol's bed and screamed and woke up the prince. He chased him away saying he still wanted to sleep. But with a sad, doting look, the griffin made the owner change his mind and start petting the pet. After all, he is so cute. The griffon was allowed to stay until the griffon boy's mother arrived. Back to that night, orders were given to escort the princess to rest, to remove the body, because many wild beasts might gather at the smell of a dead griffin. The order was passed, and tents began to be pitched. Errol looked around, made sure no one saw him, and raised his dagger over the griffin's body. While everyone was busy, he discreetly cut into the griffin's chest and removed the magical stone. He would need it to tame the baby griffin. Errol stared spellbound at the shimmering stone in his hands. A clatter of wheels could be heard from the street. The joyous Errol and the griffin already knew who it was. A princess literally flew out of their carriage and called for Fry. He was already flying toward her. While the princess and her pet were rejoicing at the meeting, Errol and the general were discussing the dark mage who had attacked the princess. That mage was declared a criminal. Kania raised her hands in the air and watched with delight as Fry flew around her. The general's men were gathering any information on the mage, for he might not act alone. The prince sighed and asked him who was the most ardent opponent of the imperial family, though it was clear that there were many who wished to destroy them. The general responded with a questioning look, to which Errol merely ordered him to go. From the hall, praise could be heard for Fry and the commands given to him by his happy hostess. Looking at his contented sister, Errol decided that attacking this little girl was just beastly, and that he needed to keep an eye on her. Attempted attacks could happen again, and Kania was now part of his family, and he must protect her. He watched them, completely in his thoughts. He needed to build up his aura as a matter of urgency, for surely by the time he was 20 he would need it. The prince made a happy face and went to his sister with a suggestion to go have fun. The girl hugged her griffin, accepted the offer with a smile, and inquired about the way he offered to have fun with her. The swords crossed at their ends. The prince stared at his sister like a predator at its prey. She had not expected such a reception from him and gave him a surprised huff. They bounced off in different directions. Kania assumed a stable position and asked admiringly about what had just happened. With a radiant smile, her brother told her that he had begun training. He wanted to show her something. Satisfied with the duel, Kania praised Errol, for he had studied on his own. Yes, he was self-taught. He just put mana into the punch, which was the basics. Kania almost cried when she heard this. Wasn't that what she'd been doing all along? Errol reassured her that he was just training differently. Kania called him a genius when he told her the secret, to which he told her that she could learn to use her mana, too. He could even show her how to do it. The girl's face brightened and she asked if he really thought she could do it. Smiling broadly at his sister, Errol assured her that if she followed his instructions she would learn quickly. After all, her brother is a good trainer. All because he was secretly pouring mana into her. For example, when she dozed off after a tea party in the garden. Locked in the training room, they began to practice. Errol ordered her to listen carefully. The blonde night girl standing outside the doors was a little surprised to hear this. Kania came to her brother's house every day and practiced aura swordsmanship. And as a result, her control skills exceeded Errol's expectations. A blue aura surrounded her sword. She had finally succeeded. She could now use mana. Even Fry's opinion was asked. Mom was cool. There was only one nuance. Her mana aura caused the cub to grow dramatically. The griffon sat on Aile's back, and with each passing day this burden pressed harder and harder in the literal sense. The beginning for Kania had been made. All that remained was practice. Errol continued his lectures, saying that the more mana someone has, the stronger they can become. He spoke admiringly of her fantasies of breaking into battle on top of Fry. Kania smiled, but didn't support his fantasies, saying that her brother had a very rich imagination. To which he agreed with a smile. Kania hugged her pet and asked if he minded because she wanted to try such a thing. Errol was sure that this day was near. The door to the hall opened and the arrival was announced. It turned out to be His Highness himself. Errol and Kania looked at the door with unconcealed surprise. They both wondered what the Emperor was doing here. His mother followed him into the hall, and the maids behind them bowed in greeting. Errol had heard that the Emperor was busy working in the north, and he was sure that he certainly wouldn't just sneak in here. The Emperor and his mother approached Errol and Kania and stood across from them. The latter bowed and said hello. Expressing some pride, Father said that word had reached him that Errol had begun fencing. Mother stood slightly behind him and smiled. Errol confirmed that the rumors were true and added that he was getting curious. After all, he needed to try his hand at other fields, not just science. After recent events, he decided that he needed to learn self-defense and also how to raise griffins. His father thought that was incredible. Errol thought his father was obviously proud of him. Smiling smugly and scratching the tip of his nose, he mentally appealed to his father that maybe he was worthy to rank with the other children and maybe above them. Two servants brought a box into the hall. Without taking away his admiring gaze, Errol asked what was inside. The father replied that it was for Errol. The box was opened and everyone present saw a truly beautiful sword. His father asked him quickly to try it out. This sword had been made especially for him. Mother said with a sweet smile that Errol was too young to wield this sword. But father, understanding her, said that boys like the feeling of a real formidable weapon in their hands, so you should not deprive Errol of it. Errol raised the sword high above his head to the concerned looks of his parents. All he could say about this sword, gazing spellbound at it from below, was that it was cool. He had the wonderful thought of why he shouldn't really go into swordsmanship now. The Emperor had never really seen such interest in our hero's eyes before. It was at that moment that he realized that our hero was very happy to receive such a gift. However, our hero just took and fell with the ball. He did not want to get into it, because even though he has a talent for swordsmanship, he does not want to show it to anyone, because once he has a sword, he will be forced to fight for power. This is the version of events does not suit him at all. However, it is not wasted his effort up to this point. After all, no one has even suspected him so far. Still sitting on the floor, and then that they're very much like this gift, but he is very sorry that they are able to appreciate it must. After all, this sword is more suited to a talent such as Sister Kania. However, our hero understood that she had become incredibly strong, barely inferior to the Imperial Knights. It was more than enough to be considered elite. It was still a long way off, but he thought that her future had every chance of making it into the top 30 Imperial Knights. He decided that he had to give her the credit she deserved. The Emperor understood what our hero was getting at, so he had one condition. He told the princess to show all her abilities. Kania was in shock, and our hero was in the same state. He could not understand why his father was suddenly so eager to see the powers, but after some thought, he realized that if you think about it, you can understand that his father, or rather the Emperor, is such a jerk on swordsmanship. The Emperor, in turn, asked her to show how far she had advanced, for if she could hit him with the very sword that our hero had given her, that would be very enough. Kania could not find the words, and our hero understood something. She was very much afraid. He nudged her and showed her a sign that she was not afraid, to show everything there, to learn something. Our hero laughed in his heart, because he knew that the princess was sure to hurt the one who did not even have to worry about it. So at that very moment a fight broke out between the Emperor and the princess. He came out and noticed that she had a good rack, sure, but it was not enough to win. He couldn't even comprehend whether his father was judging simply by her appearance, yet already at this point the princess was ready to attack. She descended on the Emperor with incredible speed, launched so quickly that even the mother of our hero could not understand what was happening. Our hero just rejoiced, because his sister's speed was at the highest level. He did not even have time to blink. The strength and concentration of mana were also quite good. However, he couldn't figure it out head on. He couldn't understand why the Emperor had such a strange smile. Didn't anything embarrass him? At the same moment, however, the Emperor blocked everything with a movement. He said it wasn't bad, it was quite a blow. He had never even seen such an aura in a child except for their commanders. He said, "Is it really true that our hero was helping with swordsmanship recently?" He said that not much, for he was only testing something, and his theory worked perfectly how you can increase the potential of a swordsman, and also decided to try this way the sister. She was the most suitable. The Emperor wondered, for does that mean, look, that his father cunningly wants to pull him in some dirty children? But our hero knew that he attacked the wrong. He thought his father was thinking of starting to mass-produce knights with an aura to create an invincible army that no other could match. So our hero said that if he meant results like his sister's, he dares to disappoint him. After all, his sister originally had high potential, for she had honed her skills since she was very young. So it is only thanks to her natural giftedness and perseverance that she has managed to get this far. The Emperor did not like it, but our hero understood that in fact, anyone could be helped by sorting out the weaknesses and identify the northern sides. But it was too cumbersome to train everyone individually, and so were the men. The last thing he wanted to see every day was a testosterone parade. His eyes were made for beautiful things, but still, he shouldn't flat out refuse it, because it would be a little suspicious. He thought he could just call it some kind of super secret technique that only the chosen few would be exposed to. So to say that this technique can only be used by family members. The Emperor hesitated, and our hero hoped that he would understand what he was thinking, because for the Emperor all the nobles around are like hyenas. You never know if they use your knowledge for good or against you. So why should our hero make their rivals stronger? The Emperor, on the other hand, said at this point, let it be so. Let it be a secret that will be passed down within the circle of the imperial family. Our hero began to shine, for it was his method of training that would be passed down from generation to generation. An imperial mouth with a family martial style, it all sounded incredibly chic. He smiled broadly and realized that at any rate, all of the Emperor's children would now be forced to train hard. It was his chance too. So already a month later, the Emperor himself had reached the maximum effect of training, and it was her, for example, who had earned this unique style. He was even put that he could not use it, too weak. But one could not dismiss the notion that our hero was so incredible that without him the Empire would not have become so great in such a short period of time. So at this point, while our hero was eating his favorite cookie, someone asked to escort him. That's right, for he needed to choose escorts. In fact, there were a lot of suitable candidates, and there were lots of applications. There were only those who had been chosen by the Emperor himself. Our hero looked at this huge pile of sheets and realized that it seemed that most of them were from noble families. However, only a couple of years ago they did not consider him for a man. He became quite popular, but he understood that sooner or later it had to happen. Considering his skills, he did not even need guards. However, there was something he did not want to play it out, or his life would end as sadly as the past. The princess cried out that it was unbelievable, and our hero was a little woozy because could he just get 3 random leaves? But it was the Turk who said he could do such a thing, but it would be better if our hero picked it all out himself. He decided that he would, because it was nice to be on the other side of the interview for the first time. Those resumes that were lying in front of him listed all the personal information, skills, achievements and more. There was too much was stated Dasha, but still he should save his eyes, because they are soon to him, so if Raz has to choose, he prefers the beautiful Adam. He immediately floated, which caused him to be incomprehensible to everyone. But at the same moment he perked up and realized that he should already begin. Next before us was a picture of how our hero met all the candidates. He expected to see unbelievable beauties in their place, but all he saw was some creepy because they were shouting very loudly. They reeked of an eerie aura, even though they were women. He was frustrated, however, because the fantasies were more rainbow-like. They asked him why he turned so pale, but our hero said he was fine, asking them to ignore them. He understood that he was not caught up in a fairy tale, for this is how a first-rate knight who trains every day should look like. He realized that he had had enough of dreaming, he had to get down to business. At the same moment he leaned on the table and asked for the attention of the dear ones there, for he was beginning the interview. He was aware that it did not look powerful, one could see that they were strong, there was even someone who was more 2 minutes on the muscle than the emperor. He picked up that if it protected him that way, he would definitely be safe. But at one point he noticed some more conventional aristocrat woman compared to the others. It was she who looked more feminine. After the interview, he realized that it was even easier to pick on because everyone responded perfectly. At the same moment he asked everyone to leave because he wanted to think for a while. But how should our hero have acted after all? Because the choice was not an easy one. So he understood that the only choice was to concentrate there, to free the internal energy and also to distribute it over the body, which stimulates the brain to help him to make a choice. He knew that this ability was not easy to activate, for it would require a lot of training and effort to achieve enlightenment. He took to the air, but he hadn't used it in a long time, so he decided to start round 2. He told everyone to come in one at a time. After all, the very reason he used this ability was because he wanted to know the intent of every knight who came to join his personal guard. He saw that time after time many had dark thoughts, almost all of them. Now these eyes saw only the man's inner world, so he didn't need a lie detector to tell the infidels apart. He could see what shade their emotional form was. He understood that he needed those who wanted to be knighted just for him, so that it would be their personal choice. At the same moment, the same aristocrat who had not a single warm spot walked in. Her name was Asia Pernil, so even though she was a knight, she was perfectly clean. He realized that he needed to be familiar with her biography, for it was possible that he had missed something. Well, if it had nothing to do with him, though, it wasn't worth the bother. He liked her because there was no one else but Asia, and he had to choose at least 2. Would he really have to pick the one Miss Muscle? At the same moment another girl walked in. She introduced herself as Saina Galil. She was last on the list. He couldn't figure out what it was that Sunbeam had come to his room. It didn't look bad, but aura was too glowing. He asked her if he had served so long overseas, for it was said that she had changed many nightly detachments. Why, though she was ashamed to admit it, she just couldn't sit in one place for long. Well, he'd probably figured out by now that she was probably just getting kicked out everywhere. He didn't see any negativity in her, so he realized that she fit his criteria. He knew something about just liking to travel, so she gets transferred all the time. That's all he needed to know. Our hero said that the interview was over, he would contact someone, but after a little thought realized what he would say, or rather, who passed. He said it was Asia Pernil and Saina Galil. That was it. He had successfully added to his flower garden. On his right was Asia, and on his left was Saina. He was very surprised, for the other was incredibly serious while he was at work. He realized it was about time to test them, and they asked him why did he bring them there. But all he answered was that he wanted to see their skills for himself. He asked to see what they were capable of. He knew that however strong the knights were, he had made them stronger, but all he had to do was feel the ground. And if I raised my hand and asked how to show him everything, because she had already agreed that it would be fair that our hero wanted to test their strength. Our hero's eyes lit up, so he said there was no other choice but to just fight each other. No one was against it, and our hero, looking away, realized that most likely his 2 new girls were somewhere on the same level, so to determine something different. Because he really wanted to see which one of them was stronger. He asked them which one was stronger. He said it on purpose. It was only because of this question that knightly pride was on the line. No one wanted to lose. At the same moment the 2 girls were asking each other what they thought of each other. Just now they would find out. The atmosphere got very heated. It was a hot confrontation of searing hotties for our hero. All he lacked was popcorn. One of the girls asked if they needed any rules, but the other one suggested that our hero solve it. Our hero, though he really got them going, was incredibly motivated even now. He said to just make sure that none of them would get hurt. constantly said that since our hero wished that, she would go easy on Asya because she had a lot more experience than she did anyway. Asya, on the other hand, said something I should not feel sorry for her, for there was full confidence in her powers, and yet she thought so spoke the truth of her wanderings. Our hero could not understand what the atmosphere was about them at all, for were they going to fight in earnest? That things were going the wrong way, so he said, or rather repeated, not to let them go too far. He said that it would start as soon as that flake. So at that very moment, when the clap was heard, our hero was thrown to the side by the very force that was on the field. He was a little displeased, because he does not know why those did not fight gentler, although he warned them. However, that just doesn't mean that he doesn't understand exactly what reason the knights use their bodies. But most likely he will succeed. Looking at the skills of the two girls on the field was very strange, however strongly blows. However, also notice that Sana just did not anticipate the attack with her senses, she saw it with her class. However, were the wild animals on the field, they are beautiful girls. At this moment Sana already rushed to translate on Asa, and our hero understood that using a spear is a primary weapon. Sometimes it becomes difficult to parry attacks when you are close to your opponent. However, is it possible to Asya to make a counter attack? So at this very moment, Asya used his leg while throwing his opponent off. Her son said that using a kick while fighting with a spear was a bit over the top, but Asya said she didn't think there was the slightest reason to hear it from her. Our hero understood that most likely those two were taking this battle too seriously, but looking closer at the field could not understand. Strange things agreed on the field at this moment, because at this rate, nothing will be left of them, and they can also see the blood on the battlefield. He shouted for these two to stop, pissed off thanks to the sparring. He had already fully learned their skills, so I think they both have something to work on. The girls didn't understand what they were talking about, so our hero said that Asya was surprisingly impatient because she's too hung up on her speed, but Sana seemed a bit indecisive because she's used to hand-to-hand combat. Asya, on the other hand, said that if you think about it, she heard that it was our hero who trained the second princess. So would the girls need to show all their abilities so that our hero could improve them? He remembered that the princess had recently become an expert, so it seems now famous among the knights of the knights. So still said that of course it was him, so now that those have become his wards, or rather bodyguards, you should become stronger. He asked if that was really the case or was it not. At the same moment his bodyguards were talking about how they couldn't think of such a thing at all because they didn't even want to make our hero worry. They looked very confused, so our hero began to glow again. He said that this refers to how his father is a maniac, so he wouldn't even lose anything if he just started giving instructions to his own subjects. So he said that while you are at his side, must become swordsmen. At the same moment the special plan for the special training of our hero's knights begins. He demanded to follow him. Coming, however, our hero led them into the classroom. Sana do those will train in such a place because it looks a little strange. Well, our hero replied that he would just lecture there on the theories. He even hoped you were prepared. At this point he pulled out his How to Be a Knight book. If it is really effective, he will sell it to the others sooner or later. Asya no, however, it was not clear to her how you should distribute OK throughout your body to learn aura, but it was as if Sana was not very interested at all. He realized that at this rate he would hardly be able to sell it. So he said that he had not expected that those would change so quickly after just one book, so at the same time he asked to see the amount of mana stored in the body that was different from everything else. And more specifically he was referring to the places that were marked with a dotted line. That's where the channels of mana circulation were. And in their case they could tell that this channel was little currently blocked. In this state, if someone is blindly emitting an aura, wasting their physical strength like a normal atomizer. After all, it was all not only very wasteful, but also dangerous, wrong, or someone trying to open it all strong. That occurs of course entering a state of negative energy. Instead of using the aura, some were scared, so our heroes said that now all they need to do is how to let the huge energy of their body. They will first have to learn how to accumulate and use this mana in their daily life and know how to circulate it productively. After all, if they succeeded in all that, he would definitely change their aura technique. He even promised it. Everyone was all fired up too because they were hoping for it. Our hero robed and said he hoped everyone understood because what followed was a theory and a class that suited each of them. The first thing he started with Sana. He said to let it learn more concentration in her own aura. However, she said that she could use it quite well while showing his fist, which was completely it can so concentrate energy in the other hand as well as both legs at the same time. However, as soon as she tried, she failed, in principle as expected. Drinking does not need to surround one's entire body with an aura, but just concentrate on the necessary areas as one gets tired when the aura is expended quickly. All this time my son tried to repeat what I told our hero, but she did not succeed at anything, because if she needs to use in several places at the same time, her senses simply cannot cope. Our hero introduced his hands to her and said that then they should do so. After all, if you feel the temperature, or rather its rise or touch, it now becomes easier to concentrate. It was a kind of trick, so asked to concentrate. At this point he knew it was working, so in a second Sena had it all, the whole two hands were on fire. She said that she probably understood, but in any case could not help but say that our hero's hands are incredibly soft. She even envied him. But our hero did not understand what was going on, why he suddenly felt so cold. So he asked her to concentrate and stop talking nonsense. At the same moment her son stood up and burned with pleasure, because now she understood everything. But our hero could not understand, because did he reveal her streams wrongly. But nevertheless he did not bother himself with it, for it is more important that he succeeded. It was time for Asa. He told her that in the previous fight, when she approached him, Asa had kicked her opponent without fear. She couldn't even believe that she could have responded with hand-to-hand combat techniques. She could have been hit by someone who had better techniques than herself. He said that this was wrong, but still when it comes to mastery of the spear, it is only important to remain calm and not to be impatient. So Asa, who was already very tired, realized that this is why our hero made her go through his training. We see our hero sitting on her back. She has had enough of talking without our hero, but he has only asked her to concentrate until this feeling comes to her. He asks her to remain calm and concentrated, as if nothing disturbs her and she moves. At the same moment, the girl sat up and realized that our hero had done a lot of things lately. However, there was no need to worry from such a fly, so that Ta simply ignored him last time. However, the Empress has shown that he has become quite annoying, so it looks like she will have to sort it out herself. As expected, this training has exhausted the Asa, and under the guidance of His Highness our hero on definitely feels that it has become much stronger. At first she didn't think the training would be difficult, but now she understands the difficulty. In front of her stood her result, a severed tree. Asa Pernal couldn't figure out if she deserved instruction from our hero, for though she was an aristocrat from a ruined family, which was not very rich, and lived quietly in a small village south, however, it was her family was exposed to the voice caused by an attack of the monsters at one point. Just because of the monsters of the girl's father died, he told you that he would delay them, but it led to a fatal outcome. Asa cried, and after a while even the nobles with whom that family used to have a good relationship turned away from them. Eventually, she volunteered to join an order of knights to earn her living. It was only because of her talent in martial arts that she was able to quickly awaken her aura and was unequivocally a royal capital. She was assigned to the 15th lowest ranked squad by the king's direct command, with only a few ranked scum, and the worst of them all was the incompetent and lazy knight commander. Even at his age, he had a very weak aura, getting his place only because of his connections. He himself wanted to give instructions to all his subordinates. He even said that Asa looked like his daughter, so shouldn't they have dinner together? So immediately she came out and reflected all her anger on the tree. However, should she chop his lower torso in the moments of the next encounter? After all, it was despair. She had applied for the position of bodyguard of a member of the royal family, but who would have thought it right away? But still, she did not need to complain, because only because of this her family life is much better, so she just need to save up some more money until she will save enough to educate her brother at the academy. She figured that all the good things that had happened lately were only because of our hero. She was obligated to pay him no matter what. At the same time, Sena said that she had applied but had to from the royal guard. She was asked what does she always get up so early. One cat is still a little unused to the very work, so in any case, and will have to stay awake. Sena herself was in mercenary family for several generations. The place where she grew up was a tribe of mercenaries that belonged to no country. It was because they were all filial. At one point she was asked if she knew that the last war with the empire had been 30 years ago, so even though the situation had become peaceful, the income of their mercenaries was decreasing. The man said that one day there would be nothing left for mercenaries like them to do, so he asked her to leave them right then and there, and the men themselves would deal with the straight old men who still insisted on remaining mercenaries. So he asked for a young person like her to leave them and find a new way. We understand that her father was sitting in front of the girl, so she said that if he insisted, no one would stop him, so she went. Sena understood that the house was now quiet, and the night's training was not difficult for her. The only surprise for her was that while the girl was away, her father was in a quarrel with a corrupt lord. He had passed away. She thought she had a silly papa, but she certainly wasn't in a position to say that. What a father, what a daughter. Because of what she went to him, she didn't even fully understand how things worked at all. Once she even beat someone, because she did not like the fact that he wanted to make their villagers bandits and off the face of the earth. However, she did not even regret her actions, she even felt some relief. so ever since then, she has moved from one place to another and has been sent to dangerous areas. Around the area, she volunteered to accompany the prince, who seemed very good to her. She was very lucky, and for some reason she liked it all. For despite everything, our hero may or may not be a myth, but he certainly isn't arrogant like the others. Whenever she looks at him, for some reason she has a strange feeling, for he has such soft and sweet hands that she wants to stroke him all the time. This is the first time she has ever felt this way at all. But the most important thing was the table, that it felt as if there could be no payment for the favor she had received from His Majesty. Then both girls rose that the only way they could repay him was to protect our hero for the rest of their lives. For though our hero would not be strong in their arts and magic, yet he has shown an extraordinary talent for learning. It was he who created all sorts of rare goods to increase the finances of the kingdom, as well as compiling a second princess to rise to the level of a specialist in aura in a short period of time just because of his theory. This was all that made him a wise and prudent man. But our hero, who was already 13 years old at that moment, lay there drinking lemonade, knowing that nothing can compare to idleness. He, on the other hand, was a hero to do his best to idle away for months at a time. At this point, the emperor was already hosting guests. They were talking about our hero turning 14 next year, so his coming-of-age ceremony will take place soon. But since he is already showing his talents in various fields, everyone thinks that this coming-of-age ceremony will be a good opportunity for him. Territory. However, no one present was against it, but the emperor understood that you just want to exile our hero to somewhere far away. Everyone understood that his holiday was used as a pretext. One even said that, in fact, the name of our hero was known not only among the lower-ranking nobility, but also in other countries. The count said that there was a possibility that the emperor would want to make him the next ruler. As soon as these words were uttered, however, the emperor became as straight as a tomato. Veins appeared on his face. He could not understand what nonsense, because how many times he told us that the heir is the crown prince. Our hero is not even interested in ruling the throne, but another person said that the main problem is that such rumors are already spreading in other countries. And moreover, the young nobles themselves support our hero instead of supporting the crown prince himself. He said that public opinion wavered, even if the parties who are related do not show it, who the emperor must understand what it could lead to. Apparently, in any case, during the reign of the previous king it happened, but the emperor after these words still asked him to shut up because he did not want to hear about it. But others went on to say that it was not only their opinion, many said they were concerned that this was the order of the royal family. They all wish only for the stability of their kingdom. But the emperor understood that these appeals were all the same, for they were determined to see this matter through. What they desire is to send our hero somewhere far away. This was the ultimatum of the nobles the emperor exhaled, for there was nothing he could do. He would take their request into consideration, so if there is a territory suitable for our hero, he asked to make him a recommendation. And now our hero already opened the letter, where he realized how the meeting actually went. Everyone wanted his father to grant him territory, but realized that they just wanted to banish him. He laughed nervously at first, but then revealed that he was incredibly happy, because at last he would have his own territory. What did he do today for nothing? Because who did this throne? Because aristocrats are potential terrorists. He was all glowing with joy, has his own territory 100 times better than being surrounded by his brothers. He changed, because finally it is time to degree. He will finally have his own house. He was very happy, for he had done it all by himself. He had achieved everything. At this point, Northern Folia, the place where it snows all year round, appeared before our eyes. After all, if anyone relaxed for even a minute, he was sure to freeze to death. Our hero understood that in such harsh lands it is difficult to farm, and it seems to him that the nobles have already decided everything. He firmly decided that they will go exactly 1 month after the ceremony of adulthood, which means they will have 1 year and 1 month. He knew that it is necessary to prepare for everything. So he told everyone with his syllable that being independent of other territories is not child's play at all. It is only for those who are ready, so if anyone doesn't want to, he will help them find other positions, and those who want to follow him then let them come forward. Our first joy, however, did not show it. They liked that fortunately followed him Alchemist and most of the others, but still this place where our hero is going did not give Sena, because she was sent there for a year. Our hero was surprised, because really had time to visit all the dangerous zones. But Sena said that this place is not very dangerous, it is just incredibly cold. There are almost no monsters. But our hero just fell down, because it is not worth trying to say something good about this place, but since she herself says that it is insanely cold there, he fully understands to feel the option, which sent him there. So at that very moment, our hero just leaned back in his chair and said it was okay, because it was better than he expected. He just thought he was going to send him instead of much worse than that, like to a place full of all kinds of fierce monsters, or instead of being crusted to death by a dragon next to his nest. He thought they would all try to get rid of him in every way possible, so it was nothing to him. Then his knights just began to cry, for they were ready to protect our hero no matter what. Wait, for they must have misunderstood something. At one point, while Asiya and Sena stood at the entrance to the gate, and today asked why she should not be honest, there was something strange in her words earlier. Sena realized that even Asiya noticed it, and I do not think that our hero did not notice it too. She said it was incredibly cold, but still absolutely nothing. The reason why the knights were sent there is to get rid of the monsters that could endure such a terrible cold. Sena asked Asiya with an incredibly stupid smile on her face. However, Asiya said not to joke about it because she wanted to follow our hero even to a place where it could surely be worse. Asiya couldn't even imagine that our hero will be thrown away so easily, but she asked her not to worry as she will find out when she looks our hero in the eyes. He certainly had some plans. She couldn't express what she was sure, but she was sure she had never felt fear in his eyes. That's why she thought everything would be alright. Asiya said that it was understandable, but she still decided that she would have to send a letter to her home country. Our hero had already finished with the documents and everything was alright for now, but what should he do with his mother, because even though she does not say anything about it, our hero is sure that her heart is broken. He began to walk from side to side and think that since he ordered the maid not to tell his mother where he will be sent, but he worries about her safety, because she will be alone. It was also necessary to remember the attack on his sister. It was necessary to create a safe way of communication. After all, if it was a sphere of communication for the ultra-long distance, teleportation circles, or magic scrolls, and was it worth hiring a mage at all? His mind began to boil, however, for he knew he had to think this through properly, but in the meantime, the whole would only be preparing to depart. But was this cruel land where he was being sent not ideal for the life of a professional such as himself? So the first step to our hero's independence was that he summoned the mages. In front of him stood Payan, who came with his students. Our hero could not even think that a familiar face would show up in front of him. Our hero asked only one thing, to keep everything that he would ask him a secret, and Payan did not mind. So our hero began by saying that there would be nothing difficult. After all, he would only ask to create an object, but as soon as possible. Payan was interested, because the time was definitely something unusual. He decided to look into it. However, having looked closer, he simply could not believe his eyes. He did not believe that our hero could draw it. He even thought that here he received it from someone. But our first time making doubts and said that he drew this, it was an updated version of the artifact that activates the brain. He even thought it was called the Sage Necklace. From the blueprint, its effect was twice as good as his existing one, while the production price was 10 times cheaper. But how did the young prince come up with something like that in the first place? The main character, noticing the surprise on Payan's face, asked if he can do it at all, or is it too complicated? But Payan, stammering a little, said that, so if he has the materials, he can do everything. However, since he does not know the creator of the original artifact, he does not even know what to say. Our hero was smiling at this, so he decided to relieve him of this uncertainty. He gave him a huge bag of gold and said that it was payment for the safety of the secret, and also the materials. Payan at this point almost broke the glass in his glasses, but our hero said that even though he is generous, but still give him a few tips for future transactions. All the mages simply fell at the feet of our hero, and he in turn rejoiced, because he had long known that money was the best way to bring people to their knees. Despite the fact that he looks like the most ordinary boy, he said that he looks forward to working with them and also wants them to cope in a month. He realized that it was definitely worth it to give the money, because now he could keep him busy. A few days later, all the magicians had already come to our hero, because they had made the necklace of the wise young prince by our hero's order. He asked not to call the necklace by that name, because it embarrassed him very much. He picked up the necklace in question and could not imagine that the body was corrected in only 10 days. The quality was not bad either, so he understood that Payan was good at it. He said it would be enough, but now they needed to start mass production. All mages hoped for no more than 5, because our hero was pointing his 5 fingers. However, despite the sweet smile on his face, he said that as many as 50, for that was all they would need. All of the mages who have been working on the whole 10 days in a row, while incredibly tired, were shocked, but Payan said that they can handle it. Our hero could definitely put it on them. Our hero saw them off with the same beaming smile, because if it seems unfair to them, then let him try to live 100 lives, just like him. At this moment, the preparation of our hero for the independence was already approaching the second stage. At this moment, he was sitting in the carriage, but Asiya asked him where they were going at all, because he must have understood that if something was needed, then he could simply order it. But then he said that this time he would have to choose for himself. Asiya wondered if it was something he wanted to buy this time. That of course he does, for they are going to the slave market. It was these words that didn't get to Asiya at first, but after a moment she realized where they were going. She began to shout that this is not the way to go, even if our hero is held by force. Our hero realized that Asiya had understood him exactly in the wrong way, and she imagined that our hero would buy himself slaves and make them work under incredibly gruesome conditions, while beating them with his grandson. She imagined our hero telling his slaves to do an impossible task for a day without giving them any food. Well, our hero started waving his hands and saying that he should have even thought of such a thing, for he certainly didn't stoop to such a thing. But what else comes to mind when it comes to slaves? Of course, the very same hell, full of screams and sobs, the shameless theft of children from their parents. But in reality, when our heroes got there, he saw that it was much cleaner than he expected. Asiya explained to him that if the slaves get sick, it will become a big problem, so the overseers watch out for that. After all, this is a place of carefully selected and healthy labor. At this point, some man came out to meet them and said that their slave market was truly large and multifaceted, so our hero, Errol, could certainly find what he wanted. He said that he, the manager of that place, and asked to be called Jan. Our hero asked him to call him by his full title, for he had arrived as a client then, but still noticed that he had been heard of there as well. Jan admitted that this was why he had to be incredibly courteous to him. He began to praise his organization that they were all law-abiding, so there was no point in questioning them. They only buy and sell labor. He went on saying something while walking forward, so that Asiya told our hero that slaves are those who are mostly unable to pay their taxes or are mired in unpayable debts. This is how one becomes a slave, because sometimes this is the only option not to die of hunger. I continued, while opening the door, that there are also thieves and criminals, but they do not need to worry about that, for they do not offer them. I say understood that they most likely understood that he was coming, so they even prepared for his visit. They could not even be disturbed. But Jan, sitting down at his table, changed his face and asked what kind of slaves our hero wants. Our hero did not invent anything and said that all of them, and as much as possible. This made Jan very happy, so that he asked how many. But when our hero said that they needed at least 150, he was shocked. The look on Jan's face made him ask, is it really that much? However, Ian was already ready to make the deal, but he still warned him that he would have to involve the resources of the branches outside the capital. He tried to ask our hero why does he need so much, but the young prince only replied that he was not stirring anything strange, for there was only one request. He would like them to divide the slaves into groups of 4 or 5 based on their kinship or familiarity. I said this task is not an easy one, but it is certainly not uncommon for an entire family to be sold into slavery. So at that very moment he called his subordinates and brought an incredible amount of documents. Our hero was surprised, because separately listed were even those who can read. You would definitely am useful. Our hero asked Juliana, will they be able to fly them to the right places for him? If so, our hero was already ready to make a deal. He asked to bring the gold. When the bag with the gold was already brought and put on the table, Yan's eyes lit up. He immediately said that he was very pleased to cooperate with the young prince. From that day he is their most privileged customer. Our hero once again became convinced that money is decisive in all worlds. Asiya in turn asked our hero, while they were in the carriage, why did the young prince need so many slaves, especially in such numbers? But on this our hero said that he just wanted to replenish the human resource of his new lands, because the more of them, the better, because almost no one lives on such desolate territory. So what is the point of being a lord of lands where there are no people? It is the slaves who will start it all. So far he has only 50 of those necklaces, but he will give an artifact to almost every family and teach what is needed at all. And if was delighted, and our hero could not understand why at all such a surprised face. After all, he's not even going to quietly die peacefully from the cold. He will find a way to maximize the territory which already belongs to him. Asiya might have thought our hero was unbelievable, but even at this moment he was thinking that he would make up everything for his own comfort. After all, everything was for an idle life in abundance. It was necessary to recruit and prepare people in advance so that there would be someone to run the errands. We just had to wait for everyone to see for themselves with their own eyes. The day has already come. Our hero understood that when a chick flies away from its nest, the most difficult moment is the moment of farewell to his home and his family. So it was at that moment, while he was thinking about it, his mother came into the room. She hugged him tightly and told him if she should talk to the emperor again. Asked her not to worry, for he would write to her often. Besides, they have a whole year to spare, so no need to cry. He raised that he would have to keep the place he was being sent to a secret. He will tell her as soon as things work out, for that alone will make her feel less anxious about his independent life. At this point, however, Princess Kania just couldn't find her place. She was smashing everything. She was asking for the next and the next opponent. She was telling them to hit with all their might, or else they would suffer. She could not understand that he would leave in this way in the capital, and it is all because of the pesky nobles. She could understand the situation from Errol's side, but she could not accept it, for the most offensive thing was that he had known about it for half a year, but had told her only now. What was it because he had decided that nothing could be changed? But in fact, we understand that our hero did not want to talk, because he knew how furious he would get. At this moment the princess, she understood that she could not just let him go. Everyone at that moment understood where this was going, because they could feel that aura. If when emotions run high, it swirls up inside the body and merges outward, everything happened just as our hero had planned. On that day, the youngest sword master, the third strongest in the history of the empire, was born. The reason for this was her obsession with her younger brother, but of course no one would ever know. Our heroes at this point are reminded of his first life because of the familiar feelings. As he went to serve, time flew by quite quickly, but after he had drunk a soporific speech and he certainly did not miss it. After all, when our hero received a summons, it was as if time slowed down. That's exactly what happened again, because the banquet on the occasion of his majority was in full swing. Everyone wanted to congratulate him for being so grown up, but it was exactly the kind of soporific speeches he didn't want to hear. Still, he had to keep a smile on his face, but he just waffled on about making everyone disappear because compared to his first birthday party, there was really no breathing room. After all, he could at least pretend to be asleep then because of his age, but now he was forced to smile and wave, just like a dummy. Still, he understood that it was a holiday, not just for them, but for all the citizens of the empire. The day when the upstart prince would finally get out of the palace. He was sure that was what everyone thought, so he was incredibly annoyed by all this pretense. Couldn't our hero make a fuss at all? However, after noticing his mother, he realized that as long as she was in his line of sight, he should behave himself. After all, in more than a month he won't see any cheeky faces. He will still show mercy in honor of his miraculous farewell. Even the empress came up and said that he was all grown up and had received his own lands. She spoke of how most likely the mother must be upset. She, on the other hand, understood that not one such event would be without this white-haired rat. He bowed to her and said that she was not upset at all, for he would have to leave her one day anyway, he just didn't choose to drag it out. The empress made an incredulous face, which she hid behind a fan. She said that Zale would be missed, for thanks to our hero his ball skills had improved greatly. He was even very grateful for the help, so the empress decided to repay him for his efforts. Our hero thought, is it really a gift? He was even sure that he would not give anything like that, it was definitely a suspicious thing. However, gave him a coat with fox fur, the most famous item in the place where he was going. At this point, our hero realized that the empress was behind it all, but he didn't even doubt it, for Zale who would accept outside help, much less thanks for it. But the person with enough power to get his way with the proper support was the empress. It was very obvious whose hands it was all in the first place. Something mocked by one presented such a divine gift, but if our hero begins to resent it, it will only be at a disadvantage. So he, in spite of all the anger, decided again to build a satisfied face. He said that he would thank his older brother later separately. He even said that if they were far away, as long as the same blood flowed in their lives, they would help and support each other in spite of all the obstacles of distance. Our hero tried to control himself, but he wanted to rip off the empress' head right away. Still, he asked fate that he would never need to say all that he did not think to his face. He hoped that day would never come at all. He walked up to the railing and realized that finally the boring banquet was coming to an end. He even had the strange feeling that he had forgotten something. At that moment he turned back and saw the princess, who was surprisingly very quiet. He even thought it was still angry at him for not immediately informing her of his move. He decided that he should apologize to her before he left, but at that moment he noticed her, who was very determined. She got up from her seat and went straight to our hero. He could not even imagine what she had in mind, but he understood that it was obviously something crazy. He saw that it was all so strange that he even sensed that the princess was about to make some strange statement. She was definitely going to get him in trouble. I was approached by the emperor, but the emperor said it wasn't the best time to talk, so he asked for a later time. But to her I was sure she should have said it right away. She said she was going to follow our hero. Our hero was shocked, for he was only thinking about something. He thought that her mother would talk sense to her daughter, but after looking at her he realized that something was also shocked. The emperor, however, said that everything was not funny, for her idea was very strange. He was covered with veins. He did not like this proposal, but our hero understood that he was all for nothing, because among all his children Kanai was the most stubborn and determined, especially when it comes to objections. In spite of all this, our hero was very curious. Why should he follow him at all? But at the same moment, the answer had already been given. Kanai said he was going to be a great knight for our hero. The emperor asked that she stop, because no matter how good she was at the ball. But in spite of all her father's words, she said that it was not the most important thing, for it was not long before she reached the level of a master. Everyone was shocked by this information, and the emperor himself could not believe it, because his daughter was only 19 years old. The only one who succeeded at such a young age was the late emperor, but the princess did not listen to him. She took the sword from the knight standing nearby and said that if no one believes, she will prove it to everyone. She began to gather mana around her and asked everyone who cared about life to step away from her. At one point she delivered such a blow that the table fell in two from a distance of several meters. Our hero was shocked, but everyone else realized that Kania was right, she could do it. But the princess told her father that she thought about it for a long time and still decided. She does not want to marry someone she does not even know. She would rather follow our hero to the unknown lands and help her younger brother on his difficult journey. She prefers the duty of a knight and protector, as she sees it as her destiny. Our hero, watching all this, it was understood that if she utters a single word, he will let out a stingy man's tear. After all, right now, in front of everyone, she refuses to be a princess. Although it may seem like a joke, but the consequences are clearly not funny, but is it really wants that? He noticed that yes, smiling, and things were gaining momentum, now it will not be so easy to turn away. What the hell has prompted her to do so? However, at the same moment I realized that it was just our hero. He was the reason for it. He went to stop her, but the princess was sure that right now she would prove her resolve. She approached our hero and knelt before him. She began to recite her vows, saying that from now on she would be our hero's loyal knight until death separates them. Our hero himself realized that it was a knight's oath. He understood that it does not count, because officially she has no right, because while her sister has not received a knighthood, moreover, it is not agreed with anyone. But the problem was that already too many people saw it, because the knight's oath is far from a joke, especially when it is given by the master of the sword. Anyone who was here would take it seriously. Did she do it on purpose? After all, from the outside it's just a concern for her weak younger brother, but in reality she's now paving a better future for herself. The expressions on the faces of everyone present simply did not leave our hero alone. Some were in shock, some were fainting. He thought he was about to get rid of his problems, but now there was another one. It was funny, because for some reason the tears came to his eyes. It was also the first time he had ever thought about it, but it seemed like his birthday was doomed to end in some kind of crap. He realized he never wanted to celebrate them again, so after that day, things continued to go on their way. Many people were already packing their bags, for it was already time to say goodbye to all their relatives. Our hero's mother was no longer so worried about everything. She had already prepared herself for this, and our hero asked her not to worry because he would visit her. However, our hero's mother said that our hero could not even imagine how much she was worried, especially when she remembers how often our hero cried in his childhood on any occasion. The main character just wondered, was he really such a crybaby in his childhood? However, this was not important now because he continued to listen to his mother saying that he had too weak body, so he should immediately seek medical help. Our hero calmed her down because everything will be alright, because he already wanted to name the place where I sent him. But he did not have time because his mother said that she knew everything. He was surprised because he kept everything a secret, but she said that all mothers know absolutely everything. She said that it didn't matter where they sent him because she had an incredibly smart boy. So that's why she wouldn't say how worried she was about him anymore. She just asked our hero to be careful. Our hero was moved to tears in his eyes because he understood that having a family is always very sad, even though he could return at any time. The carriages had already departed. They went to the northernmost part of the empire, the frozen land at the foot of the icy mountains. He was going to conquer a land that no one dared tread on. Not even pickaxes could penetrate that very ground, they would just break. He peered out into the street and could not understand, did anyone really want him to die like this? But he understood that even in the mouth of a volcano he was going to find a way to survive. In fact, our hero stuck his head out and rather it was to check the magical objects that warmed his body. And his sister wondered why he had spent so much money on expensive, because the carriage was warm as it was. After all, she was wearing a dress in such a cold. However, when he looked at her with his eyes, he realized that she was using it. He had not even taught her that. Is it really just the instinct of self-preservation? Our hero leaned on the seat and said that her abilities were actually frightening. Her sister wondered, because can't everyone do that? However, our hero asked her to make just a table so that she would not ask people such a thing because they can be punished for such a thing. He asked if she would not regret that she went with him, but she suddenly became very aggressive and asked, is our hero really tired of his company? She began to squeeze his cheeks, but that was not what he asked. He spoke of whether she regretted her decision to stay with him. After all, because the princess decided to go with him to the north as his personal knight, then our hero had a whole day to convince the emperor to excuse himself. Even so, the princess didn't want to stay and went along with him. She kept squeezing our hero's cheeks and saying she didn't want to because it was a great opportunity. Our hero did not understand what opportunity she was talking about, so she realized that she did not tell her brother anything. She said that if he stayed in the palace, I would definitely get married this year. Our hero understood that this was the very reason, for she was already 19 years old. It was even surprising that she had not been married before, so now it was clear to him why she had wanted to go with him. Sis, like our hero, does not like confinement, so he can understand her. However, from that day on the princess knew that she was now free. Our hero wondered what kind of bridegroom they had chosen for her in the first place. Well, the one just turned away and said that she refused. She does not even know his face. So he considers himself extremely lucky that the wedding will not take place. After all, she had given him such an intolerable family life that he would have begged for mercy. Our hero didn't even know if he was saying thank you to that unknown guy or not. At this point he walked into his estate. He realized that now 1,000 soldiers as well as 200 slaves would be the new inhabitants of the place, as well as his entire retinue, alchemists and maids. So it was time to begin creating his own paradise. First, he wanted to establish the defense of his domain, but this task fell to Asiya and Sena. As for the princess, no matter how sorry he was, he did not want to give her the job, because she would tear down the knight's barracks in no time if she did not like something. However, she did not care much about the work with the army. After all she ever did was walk outside and lie in the snow. So at this very moment, our hero decided that it was time to start with all the inhabitants. He realized that his total population was about 10,000 people who were scattered through 12.5 small villages. So the first thing to do was to make his way to them, since most of them are hunters and gatherers who have lived here for centuries. No one had moved in or out of there for 100 years, so the population continued to fall. He understood that the area was not only poor, it was on its way to oblivion. The palace wasn't even going to debt, rather than just blacklisting the place ignored it. Our hero wondered if the Lord was even here, so he immediately took the ledger and realized that such a Lord was, only his lands did not work out. Due to lack of money he borrowed a huge amount, which should have meant that he would go bankrupt. Our hero already thought that it could not get worse. The past Lord was an example of what it is better not to become. So he rolled out a map on the table and realized that he would have to do everything himself. There was even something to see. There weren't many people there but lots of trees. Should he start doing wood? Maybe start happening paper. Beating paper in this world is valuable stuff, worth a try. His other goods were still selling steadily, so nothing to worry about. He realized that on that they had decided, so it was a good time to get to know the inhabitants. After all, if the past Lord turned out to be a fool, then who tacitly rules the whole territory, they are exactly what our hero needs. He immediately asked to gather all the old villages, and do not miss any of them, and be sure to bring it to him personally. At this point the door flew open. He realized that the inhabitants of the Ice Valley, all fat strong, such are quite able to tear the hands of wolves, all greeted our hero, so our hero began his presentation. He said that he promises to be a lord for them to rely on. He understood that probably in their eyes he was just a child who was empowered. Probably no one believed him. Well, look at him from the account certainly will not allow. Our hero noticed that one of the people looked quite young, but our hero asked to gather only the elders. At the same moment the same young man said that his father was the headman of the village until last year but passed away. So that is why he took his place. Our hero already knew everything from the report, which he had been strutting around all night. He didn't want to get to the bottom of it. Well, he just wanted to let them know that he was the authority here. So at this point he said he had a long conversation to have, so everyone must be tired on the way here. He suggested everyone continue the conversation at the table. Our hero learned that the people of the lower class hated the most. They hated lunch with their superiors. It was at the table that usually a piece of the throat wouldn't go down. He was already imagining in his head how he would bore everyone. The young lord himself didn't particularly want to eat at the table, but he liked the expressions of the faces around him. He asked everyone why everyone was so tense, but even so, he didn't like the atmosphere either, because if they all knew how he was preparing for this meeting. He was preparing surrounded by his knights, and also by his sister, who was always laughing at him, for she had never seen his face serious. One of the men opened the tray and noticed the incredible food there. Our hero noticed that you were open, so he said he wanted to treat them to something better, but he only had this. Everyone said they were grateful, but our hero realized that they would go along with whatever he said. But it really is a simple dish, for he has no money for luxury food yet. One of the men tasted the meat and realized that it was salty. Our hero also realized that salt is very valuable there, and salted meat is considered a delicacy. Despite the fact that he is their lord, by eating what they eat, he tries to show his closeness to the people. After all, he is the one who wants to be a wise lord to his people. At this point he addressed them, saying that the former lord had probably caused them quite a bit of trouble, for if a lord does not consider the opinions of the people, it is quite hard. He warned everyone that things would be different now than they had been before. He said it was my opinion that to continue to do what they had been forced to do for 10 years was against the law. He understood that the hunt could only feed them, but it couldn't go on forever. That's why from now on he would give them some instructions that would seem incomprehensible to them. The only thing he can do in this situation is to ask in advance to simply trust him, for whatever reason. As soon as our hero got up from the table to give his fiery speech, everyone was in awe of him. He seemed like an angel to them. Our hero, however, asked them not to make up anything superfluous, for there was no need to build a cult around him. In any case, he only wants them to follow his instructions. So if I try, he'll let them and their people forget about the endless food extraction. His first decree was that those should welcome the people he brought with him. After all, the slaves were to be distributed among the villages and settled. They were all set free and could live here in peace with their families, and those who could read would work directly for him. The heads of the villages said that they would accept them, but the question was different. Will other residents accept them? After all, even if they were freed from slavery, the wall of status was difficult to break down. From the residents' point of view, they are simply rejected. Our hero asked not to worry, for he was only asking for a dickless pest and not for nothing. He hopes that they can come to an agreement. He showed a certain gesture, which everyone understood yes, so all the chapters a second later had already said that they would do everything possible in their power. At the same moment everyone went outside, and they couldn't understand, were all the past lords like this? However, the headman said that compared to the former ones, he thought our hero was very strange. Most of the lords never showed any interest in this territory, for these lands were like a place of exile to them. The last lord did try to do something, but ignorantly made a lot of messes, so many residents suffered because of it. And now a new lord has arrived, a young boy who just recently had his majority ceremony. He first thought it couldn't get any worse, thinking why did our hero come there in the first place? I hope that at least he won't be brewing nonsense like the previous lord. But looking into the eyes of our hero, he realized that this man is not like everyone else. However, he didn't even know if they had hope or not. The only thing they had to do was to see, but for now they would just have to trust. Our hero was looking at the papers, or rather documents, which the servants had already sorted out. He was lying on Seina's lap, for he had only decided to play a child. Because when he first took possession of the land, the population was about 10,000, but once he checked, it was 9,651, including the villagers, which he counted at about 9,800. But Seina said it was only natural for the population to be smaller. After all, while the Lord was changing, the drain was full, but now where are they going? After all, the number of newborns is also quite small, and the poverty of these lands is to blame. Even considering our hero's fortune of 450,000 gold he had brought with him, and the cost of settling in, that's enough money for 50 years or more. All those aristocratic bastards put him there on purpose to bog him down in the mire of local problems. He's sure everyone hopes he dies. Will the farming actually fail? Seina was sure, for the former lord went bankrupt precisely because he wanted to divorce farming there. Our hero understood that he was a jerk because their only gathering and hunting is possible. Is it really the only option to earn money? However, our idea at the same moment, it was time to use the Kinky Hands plan. So the first reform for the dying territory was, of course, roads. He noticed that there were potholes everywhere, causing many accidents. And there were no signs anywhere, no semblance of offense, in a word, no one had ever dealt with the roads. So at this very moment our hero began to execute his plans in reality. He submitted this document, to which many people were surprised, because everyone even thought that the Lord was hiring people for this work, and also promised to pay generously. This is exactly what he was talking about the other day. After all, since he is the one who will take care of all the expenses, shouldn't they try? But notice that the work is already well underway. Many people think that it will be a very large enterprise, judging by the plan. But our hero said that it's okay, because if it takes more time than indicated, he will still pay what is due. At that very moment, people began to shine, they spoke, or rather expressed their gratitude. And our hero understood that money is power. He liked the way others worked from the outside. But he couldn't help it, because it's the truth of the world, if you want you have to work. At this point, as soon as the roads were completed, our hero said that now you can get to them comfortably, so you can already continue to work. The second reform for the dying area was to set up a trading company. One of the people said that he did not think that their area was suitable for that, while our hero only said that probably one should just keep quiet and do the work while handing over a large sum of money. He understood that for the time being it is only necessary to establish the trade of items of first necessity for the locals, if he will give them orders from the trading company he runs. Trade is a very big step forward, and in the meantime our hero began to implement the latest reform for the dying territory. He asked Damon to tell him if what he had in mind was even possible. Damon looked at the papers and noticed that our hero wanted to produce paper. Paper exists in their world, of course, but it is of poor quality, made by simply steaming pressed fibers, and even that technology is foreign, so no one in the Empire knows anything about it. Because of its high price, only people of high status can buy paper, and it seems that he has seen it traded in the Imperial Library. Most people use parchment paper, and then only in dire need of it. Damon understood that paper was certainly an object of value. He even thought that its production would turn out to be quite profitable. But the problem was that no one knew how to produce it. Did our hero have a development? At this point our hero got up from the table and said, does he really think that our hero would offer it if he didn't have a plan? said that they have competitors. Our hero said that is not a problem, because they will percolate a brand new paper. He asked Damon to object if there was anything he didn't like, but asked to start by taking a look at the special equipment they use. Damon said it was flawless, but he wasn't sure if they could make it now. After all, they are specialists. Alchemy, chemical elements or medicine is one thing, but designing machines is another matter entirely. The local blacksmiths could hardly forge something like that, but if they were dwarves from the capital, then it would be possible. Our hero heard the name and realized that there aren't too few of them in the Empire. Besides, they take orders. Many say that they can do anything, no matter how difficult. So at that very moment he realized that spending money, that's his job. So at that very moment he went to get money. For dwarves, these are not the people before whom you can mindlessly with money, because don't these people love money? But in fact the difficulty was that it was all the fault of their pride. An order where they can show their skill, so our hero asked to take his gold back. Yes, I told him that if they do not like him they will easily refuse, regardless of the amount of money and the identity of the customer. However, our hero couldn't understand, because did they really have such exorbitant pride in their own craftsmanship? Did someone really think of the experience and knowledge that could be gained by working on a job order instead of the really high wages? He understood that if such orders dried up, then they would swallow. Damon said he would ask his gnome acquaintances for a look, so our hero began to glow at the information he heard. Demon was sure that this blueprint will interest them all. So a few days later, in the village of gnomes, or rather in the forge, one of the gnomes asked no one to idle, because the faster not finish the work, they will be easier. He was working, but one of the men said he had received a letter. He couldn't accept the fact that it was probably people from the Empire writing to them asking him for something. He asked for a reply that he would think about it in a year, but the man kept insisting that the sender was the alchemist who had come to him 10 years ago. The house remembered him, but could not understand why he needed him. However, the dwarf got quiet, and after a few seconds he told his servant, Ben, that he would do all his work for a while. He left the room, said that he had to discuss everything as soon as possible with the other guys he could not understand, because was it so important in the letter that he changed his face so quickly, so what was actually written there? At this point everyone couldn't understand why the dwarf had gathered them all there, for they already had so much work to do. They said that if it was so free, then let him go alone, because what the hell is making such a fuss here? Who said it was no big deal, though, because a guy sent them a blueprint that he drew himself. He asked them to make something for him for the kind of equipment in Fahilia. The dwarf said it was insolent, and also asked them not to say that the main dwarf had called them together just to discuss it. But the dwarf who summoned everyone said he thought exactly the same, but asked to see them. At this point they all saw a blueprint for making paper. He asked to remember what happened 5 years ago. He talks about a guy from the east who said that he was going to produce high-quality paper. Everyone remembered this, because in the end they could not meet his expectations with their skills. After all their work, all they got was humiliation and shame, all they experienced. Some even then wanted to throw away their hammer. However, the gnome picked up that scroll and told them that an idea was about to come to them, and a technology that they could not achieve 5 years ago. And also that man was asking for help, asking people to go to him. He exhaled and with a smile on his face said that if no one wanted to go, then he would have to go there alone. They asked him to stop talking nonsense, for didn't he have a lot of work to do? But he asked them not to make him laugh, for his disciples could take care of the rest. Everyone was silent, but began to fight, for they also wanted to go. After all, if it was a business trip, everyone was nominating themselves. As expected, no one could hide their excitement. Everyone must have been interested in the blueprint. But at one point the gnome asked everyone to stop, for if they all left, there would be nothing they could do about the forge. Only half of everyone present would be able to go. He said there was nothing that could be done about it. However, as soon as the worker of that very dwarf went into the room, he saw something unbelievable, the dwarves fighting. After all, if they don't negotiate, they settle things fairly with their fists. That was the iron rule of the dwarves, who had taken care of this forge for many years. The worker is out, while closing the door very slowly. And our hero, as part of it in his chair, realized that by the new will take at least 5 days to give his answer, so what did he do until then? But the idea itself came to him, for there is nothing better than idleness. He liked lying around this, for since there must be no work for a while, he could very well rest. However, shouldn't he start? He had waited incredibly long for this moment, but at the same moment he heard someone scream. He could not understand, since when did his griffon become so loud? However, he realized that the griffon was at an incredibly high altitude. He couldn't believe his eyes. You definitely have someone flying skillfully, but he didn't have the ability to develop such speed. It was too much for a young griffin. However, it was actually a princess who was throwing a griffin in the air while trying to teach it how to fly. Our hero asked her what she had done, for Fly had done something wrong, but at this the princess said nothing of the sort, for she was simply teaching him. Our hero just couldn't understand how it could be called training. We are transported back in time. We see the full story of what happened. As this was the beginning of the transfer of duties, it seems that the princess was the only one who was free while everyone else was busy. She had a rather interesting solution, just me. First there was food, then sword training, then sleep. And so it was day after day. So for someone who can't sit in one place, when she started with boredom, she found Griffon playing in the garden just in time. That's when the trouble for the Griffon began. She said that in the future he was going to be a riding beast. But what could he do if he was so slow? I say I understood the reason why she made him train. However, our hero felt that he should have taught his sister common sense rather than the art of wielding a sword. Shouldn't he take this opportunity to play with her? Everyone is busy outwardly, but now he really didn't have much time. After all, if you think about it that way, how the usual siblings actually have fun since he was an only child in his first life. He certainly had blood relatives in other lives who could be called siblings, but the relationship before this life was certainly not a warm one. The most normal ones were when they didn't even talk to each other until they died. So he, as a former professional like him, doesn't even know what to do this time. Our hero took the Griffin at this point and let the air out. He said he could fly and be free. He saved the poor Griffin. But at the same moment, looking at his sister, decided that he needed to be a model brother in this life, so he offered to play together. The first game you went to was chess, but apparently brain activity for his sister was something difficult, and the chessboard was turned on its face. His sister screamed about not liking the game, and our hero had to succumb to it. He himself did not want to play it, but in the north was strained with entertainment, chess at least bored. He approached his sister and asked her not to worry, because you can try again. He asked her to use the artifact he had given her, for it was the one that would help her think more broadly. But in fact he knew that nothing will help, because the experience of playing chess is 100 times more than that of an ordinary person, but does he really have to give in? However, one more game, the magic stone just took and cracked. The sister of our hero had a very angry face at that moment. She took out her sword and cut the chess into 4 pieces. Our hero just fell into a depression because chess was the most appropriate option to get a little wiser. At this point, the princess pretended not to know anything, but still said that they would not play chess now. Our hero couldn't imagine another game they could play. He couldn't think of anything. He asked what does he usually do in his spare time. Well, she said that's what she does, she works out. I could not believe these words, because she was not tired of just taking and working out. As our hero, in no way he cannot normally rest. However, how is he to do in this situation? Well, then realized as soon as they sounded the stomach that we could cook something together. This frightened her, for she had never cooked in her life. She asked, do we have to? However, our hero said that the knights were obliged to cook for themselves. Riding in their time, knights were not just guards, and they went on expeditions to destroy the monsters. But the most important thing was that such expeditions lasted more than a week. So do you really think his sister, that she could starve all this time? Especially if you don't know about food and processing, you could easily get food poisoning. He began to say that cooking was an important aspect of everyone's life, pointing out his sister said that that was why his sister had to learn how to cook. She cornered, very upset, but still agreed. He asked not to worry, because he will help her, but still found it very strange that it is the younger brother will teach his older sister to cook. At this point, our hero had already put on his chef's suit and said that today they would be cooking a stew. Meat was the simplest dish that is made from a moderate amount of ingredients. It was the most common soldier's meal during the campaign. It was easy to make and most people liked it, so it was perfect. He even hoped to get by without any accidents. Our hero watched his sister cut vegetables and realized he was so good at handling them. All the while our hero was helping her by telling her what she needed to do next. He kept telling her what she needed to do. At this point his sister's first course was cooked. She asked him, how was it? He answered, not bad, because if she learns to cook even better, then any trip, any length of it will be up to her. At this point our hero understood that his task to entertain his sister had come to an end, so after he had eaten he would just go and rest for an hour. However, while he was eating, one of the servants burst into the room, saying he had an urgent announcement. Even though our hero had warned him not to be disturbed by them, it seems that something really serious had happened if they had listened to his orders. He asked what had happened. So at the same moment they said that the delegation of goblins had arrived. Our hero couldn't believe it. However, the servant said that the goblins threatened to kill him if he didn't bring our hero immediately. Our hero simply could not come to his senses, for why had the dwarves arrived so quickly? In any case, however, he was all again that they had at least agreed to help. It was only necessary to act according to the plan, because at this point it was better not to be lazy. Still, he didn't think the dwarves would arrive so soon. He really needed to welcome them with dignity. He was about to greet everyone, but the dwarves came up to him, right to his face, and asked, is he the man who invented the blueprint? Asea, who saw it, reached forward and said that you are being treated too rudely. She asked him to apologize. The dwarf noticed that the girl standing beneath him was very strong, yet the girl continued to ask to apologize to them, while becoming incredibly aggressive. However, for the record, the concept of title and status are accepted only in human society. In the form of gnomes do not care about these formalities and will not exactly talk the same way, not normal. Our hero asked to stop. In front of them stood actually important guests. He understood that it was not necessary to drag out the conversation because if they did something wrong, a Sia would eat them alive. Our hero answered their question. He said that he was the author of the blueprint. But dwarfs, of course, could not believe it. They asked to prove it, because if this is some kind of human joke, it is better to show immediately the person who made this drawing. Our hero wanted to say that it was him, but the dwarf still did not believe that the weak child can do something like that, because he cannot even hold a mold. Our hero is Tosha 1, so he asked Sia to deal with it. Today our hero wanted 1 sashimi from the dwarf. However, to finish it, the butlers themselves had to intervene in this. Then the dwarves, having already dealt with the butler himself, asked for the last time, did our hero really work out this blueprint? Our hero didn't even have the strength at that point, for he had already brought 7 references to confirm it. He also asked, why did they come so quickly, for if he had known, he would have met them properly. They would have had a break or a breath of fresh air. But the dwarves got right down to business. They asked, does our hero want them to build him that thing? Our hero also said that's exactly what they want, because they don't have enough skilled craftsmen to build it. The dwarf was pleased, for the workmanship of such parts is beyond human hands. And our hero did not understand, does it boast here that he is a dwarf? But our hero said that at least the human brain is enough for good ideas, for he is a genius. He began to brag about himself, that he drew the blueprint, that he was incredibly smart, but in fact he was a genius. He even has an incredible amount of developments under his belt, said he believed it, but judging by his strangeness, he is quite chatty. He immediately calmed down, because the only way to convince him to be proud is the very start. He even believes that the case is in the hat. Our hero was about to say what he wanted from them, but the gnome was asked to stop, because they had already made a decision. Since they came to him, they are sure to take the job. Because they have not even discussed the cost, any conditions will suit them. Anything, because they only take the job they like. If he needs such a car, however, they would look at other developments. Our hero decided to please them, said that this is really not the only drawing he would like to show them. The dwarves were quiet for a while, but still said that even though they weren't hinting, they would very much like to look at the others right now. Our hero noticed that they only had passion in their eyes, so he pulled out another drawing at the same moment. The dwarves were about to take it, but our hero immediately put it away, saying that not so fast. The dwarf very much wanted to collect this scroll, but our hero said that it would have to wait, because first you have to collect it all on the drawing, which he sent them, only then he will show the rest. Dwarf first on the table, he did not like it, but our hero made a very strange face, and also said that the trust of the genius is yet to be earned. Dwarf turned and asked to wait for our hero, because he will create this thing a moment. In their eyes just burned fire, and our hero was glad, because they really liked the blueprint. He wanted to show the whole plan of creating the machine at once, but he changed his mind. He will use everything, just as a bait. He is sure that then they will work twice as fast. He praised himself, for he had come up with an incredible bait for the dwarves. That was his dark side. Everything went according to plan. At this point the dwarves began to drop in on him more and more often. You could see sleepless nights in their eyes. As soon as they finished one car, our hero would give them another. He would ask if they were sleeping at all, because they were keeping him awake even when he was sleeping, or bathing, or trying to do something personal. So heroes could not understand why they had such strange faces, because they completed the construction in less than 10 days. On the production of paper number 1, and in the hands of Damon the result of their labors. He had in his hands surprisingly clean paper. Our hero was pleased with himself, because he was so cool to think up everything, without mentioning the dwarves who built this conveyor. Unlike ordinary paper, which artisans dry by hand 1 sheet at a time, he created a machine that stamps it in batches, and in addition, with a perfectly white color. They are very fortunate, for their edge is full of wood. He would easily make a paper-making factory. When he asked if everything suited our hero, but he said that he needed a few more machines, which really upset the gnome. It was only a matter of time when her paper will hit the shelves around the world, only to set up trade and the paper can be earned. At this point, many people came to our hero, because he was looking for a man who will be responsible for selling paper. Uncle first responded. He was sent by his mother. Trust were relatives on my mother's side. Our hero was asked what kind of product he would sell, but at the same moment our hero showed what his uncle could not imagine. For sale, there could be a real scandal. If he sells a better product, but a cheaper one, his competitors will be furious. After all, lately the demand for paper has been growing, so the price has skyrocketed. And all because of the laborious process of creation. It sells faster and faster, and the price continues to rise. Even my uncle recently barely managed to buy some for a pretty penny. It's almost a luxury item. He said that if the quality of the product suffered even a little bit in the making, there would be a scandal. But our hero said there was no point in worrying, because customers would have no reason to complain about them. Their paper is a brand new product which is different from others. Uncle thought that providing people with a better product without any markup was an incredibly unique production system beyond competition. But is there really a better product than our hero's paper? At the same moment, he lit up because he decided to make a sales plan right now, because thanks to the low price they organize sales even where paper only dreams. Our hero noticed that in front of him stood a natural-born salesman. He could definitely trust him. It was at this moment it was time to make money. So by this point, our character realized that he was finally able to get the dwarves to build some of the machines he wanted to see. But it's been less than a day since his construction was completed. Are they really coming back? Don't they just want to celebrate a little and have a delicious dinner? But the dwarves in turn replied that they had a lot of work to do. Of course their students were doing it, but it would be better if they return. But still made it clear that if there was such an interesting job for them, they would definitely want to see and join them at any time. Of course, the dwarves immediately went home, and our character was confused because he thought that they would at least celebrate. He definitely couldn't have done it without them. But all the same, he knew that now he could start on one thing. You can start selling the paper. As soon as this paper went to the counter in the cities, everyone was shocked. They couldn't understand why the ink didn't spread and the paper didn't tear at all. Why is the quality of such paper simply amazing? Many princesses and queens also discussed this, saying that the new Lord of Fahilia had produced a new kind of paper, that they released new roads there. Everyone was incredibly animated that the new young lord was working so hard in such a dysfunctional place. Of course, the king also noticed that the material for the documents had changed. Does his butler know anything about the new type of paper? The butler immediately confessed that he knew what it was. After all, this novelty is much cheaper and better than all its predecessors. The king asked where it came from, but the butler immediately replied that it was all the work of the king of Falia. The king was immediately very happy that it was his son, but the butler also told him that Fahilia would pay taxes from this year on. Of course, the king was very happy, but he still couldn't believe that Fahilia had changed so much in such a short time. While he was so excited about everything, our protagonist was lying in his bed and thought that someone was remembering him at the moment. But the fact that he could now afford a lot of honey pleased him more. Of course, by then we're back to the queen drinking tea with her son. They are drinking tea given by our character. Of course, the son thought that Fahilia dead, but it was the question that caught the queen off guard, but she immediately calmed down. All she thought was that she needed to somehow get rid of both our hero's mother and himself. Her son noticed all this, but at the same moment the mother calmed down and decided to leave the table. She said that the crown prince who would succeed to the throne was sitting in front of her, so of course he would need to buy the perfect sword. He must always live and think like an emperor. Of course, as soon as her son left, the queen was left alone. She emptied the cookies on the table and knew only that everyone liked the same piece of paper that had been designed in Falia. She still kept hearing the name of our main character. The news made her so angry that she simply threw the cup of tea on the floor. We, in turn, understand that the queen's real name is Aaliyah Prats. Duke Prats's family was the only merchant family that produced paper. Even abroad, they only had two competitors. The first is the paper of the Maritime Empire from the east. However, after the war with the former, the paper developed there was forbidden to be transported there. And the second competitor Prats just took and bribed. Of course, Aaliyah was absolutely furious because they had invested so much money to create an exclusive product not for everyone, and the little guy had created something new again. How dare Errol do something like that? Of course, the queen knew that she couldn't wait any longer, so she took pen and paper and began to write something. Of course, our Errol didn't waste any time. He went to the slave shop again. It's been exactly 6 months since he invested a lot of money there and became quite a significant figure there, so many people took his service quite seriously. Of course, when he went in, he confessed that he needed slaves, but did he have any demands? Our Parisnage Tudu also said that he needs strong guys who will be resistant to cold weather. Now he is looking for such real slaves. Sir couldn't figure out what purpose he was going to use them for if he wanted guys like that. But our protagonist did not hesitate. He immediately confessed that such as they will need him for protection. While the roads were being repaired and paper was being created, there were simply not enough soldiers, so the purpose of the slaves would be to protect the territory of Fahilia. Of course, our character understood that the title of Lord is almost equal to the title of Count. With this, he would be able to increase the number of soldiers to 50,000. Wouldn't that be enough? She asked how many slaves Errol would need. Our protagonist raised his hand and held up 5 fingers. Sir thought it meant just 500, but our hero confessed that he meant as much as 5,000. Sir saw this as a huge amount of money, and at the same time, our character just stood there and smiled while Sir recovered from the shock. Of course, Sir admitted that he would have as many as 5,000 people, and Errol I was once again convinced that it is money that decides absolutely everything in this world. Of course, after passing through the streets, he went back to testing the swords that were created by the dwarves. Their quality could amaze anyone. Of course, all that remained was to train the slaves in self-defense, since he had ordered a set for each of them. Making 5,000 copies in such a short period of time is probably affordable for his people, but the slaves were not happy when they arrived in Fahilia, so he decided that they should raise their spirits and there will definitely be a result. Of course, by that time, all the slaves had come out to greet their new master, the master of their land, or rather Arella. He stood and looked at them with full hope in his eyes, hoping that they were strong enough, so it would definitely be enough to protect his land. And if he's done a good job, now's the time to rest. Towards nightfall, some people wanted to make their way to the paper mill of our main protagonist. The goal of their mission is to destroy the factory in Fahilia. They need to remove all the cars without a trace, because all this will cause huge damage to their economy. Of course, they thought that there would be no protection inside the building, and if the mission went smoothly, then each of them would receive enough money to last them for the rest of their lives. They began to inspect the building and noticed that there were only 2 guards. It would not be difficult to get rid of all of them, so at the same time they got close to them from behind and immediately eliminated them. Of course, they decided to go inside, but they noticed that there was nothing there. It was at this moment that they were captured by the knights. They realized that they had been ambushed, and how could there even be so many soldiers in one place? As soon as the noise started, our character came in. The assassins immediately started begging for mercy, saying that it was a simple order. But our hero definitely did not feel sorry for them, because they had already illegally entered his territory and killed his people, spoiled other people's property. He immediately ordered them to be sent for questioning and interrogated until they came out with everything they knew. Of course, our Errol went home, because he understood that everyone could figure it out without him. He is not a fan of violence, but there are things that no one can get away with, because his family, friends, all of them are not strangers to him. It was impossible to let even one of them get hurt. It is these principles that do not allow him to step over himself, because he has already gone through this many times. The next morning came. Break were interrogated and punished according to the laws. They will live like slaves for the rest of their lives. But they really did not know anything about the identity of the customer, so there is no benefit from the interrogation. I had to think of something else. But there was also good news, because now our main character was able to deal with the economy, so we didn't have to worry about not having enough money for further development. There was a lot to do, but it was time to try out one thing, the magic circle for teleportation. The goblins finished it. The price was exorbitant, because all the components of the creation were magical, but it was worth it. Of course, if he had to redo it twice, then he wouldn't worry, but he didn't want to think about the sad things any further, because in any case, he would definitely try to get home with it. The magic stone was inserted, the last part was finished, so the other side had to be finished as well. Of course, for this case our Errol they called Kania, who was very concerned about this device, whether she really should have gone along with her brother. But then our character said that there is nothing wrong with this, because the movement will not take much time. Does she really feel bad? But of course Kania didn't want to do anything, but she didn't give it any thought. It was for this reason that our main protagonist had to take Kania by the hand and enter the portal, saying that she would find out the result herself. She only needed to focus on teleporting. Kania agreed. But she was still scared, so our Errol once again told her that everything was safe and the side effects were just a little dizzy. Since his little sister was ready, it was time to start. By that time, Kania was so scared that she started choking our character, so he couldn't really say that everything was going well, but a second later they were at their home and Kania calmed down. Our main character's face was filled with memories from his childhood, so he immediately began to kiss the ground beneath him and realized that now he can't worry about being cold all the time. Of course, the nanny came up to them, who was also pleased with herself because she seemed to have managed to insert a magic stone, and also said that Lady Finalia was waiting for Lady Kania. Of course, Errol said that they should split up, which really upset his little sister, but there was nothing to do because running from her would not work. Of course, our main character's only thought was that what did his mother do? She didn't need anything while he was gone, did she? Sure enough, he immediately opened the door and started hugging his mom, who was also unbearably happy to see her son. She began to say that she knew what he was doing, because it was her uncle who wrote to her about what was happening in his duchy. Of course, Errol didn't know how his uncle had had time to say anything at all, as he had been overworked and probably very thin recently due to fasting, but he still needed to tell his mother personally what exactly was going on in his duchy. My mother agreed. By that time, they went out into the yard, where our character's story began about how it was snowing all the time, a lot of white rabbits and the like. However, Errol did not exactly say that these rabbits are 3 meters in height. In addition, he told her about his progress, about all the animals that live in Fahilia, including the indigenous population. He told her everything that would please his mother. But by then, he heard footsteps, the footsteps of the person he definitely didn't want to see around him, the queen. Of course, she pretended that the prince had arrived without warning, but our hero understood that he had definitely notified everyone, so what was this woman up to anyway? What does she even want to tell them? So in order to prevent his mother from talking to her, he decided to ask what was going on with his majesty. After all, Errol himself, I've heard that the eldest prince is doing quite well. Immediately, the queen made it clear that everything was still going on in the palace, so if you think about it, she heard rumors that the economy was booming on his land recently. Of course, our main protagonist decided to say that all this is true, because it's all thanks to the machine that he developed. The queen can't even imagine how happy the people of the empire were with the new products. Of course, all this was said to make the queen nervous, too. Her pride must have been hurt, because that prince she looked down on had hit her family's business hard. But in any case, there was no reason to worry, since his paper was definitely better than hers. Of course, the queen immediately pretended to have heard about some bandits, but Errol only thanked her for such a warning and there were no problems. Of course, at this point, the queen went home, but she definitely gave a hint that you need to be careful in the future. Our hero's mother noticed that the empress wasn't in the mood today, so our protagonist said it was probably just family matters. Deep down, he was focused on the fact that he was now ready to accept her challenge, because sooner or later they would have to do it anyway. By then, time was running out, and our Ariel had to go back to where he came from, so he said goodbye to his mother and then asked his little sister how it went with her. He was clearly laughing at her, so Kania immediately hit him on the head. Of course, to be honest, our protagonist was worried after learning everything from the maid. He thought that it would be necessary to fight. You will find out, he just has a very violent fantasy. It was at this point that the portal began to close, and all the characters knew that their adventure home had come to an end. A few days later, at Fahilia Manor, a new problem has occurred. Now they need a mage. There were several reasons for this. The first reason is that mages can activate the teleport circle without hindrance, so landowner Flax definitely needs a mage on his territory. They can also help grow various crops with magic, not to mention trees for paper production. Isn't this the perfect helper? Even when monsters or enemies attack, a mage's strength can be a decisive factor. So, where would you get a universal magician? Of course, he immediately reached for his books, but he couldn't find anything. He doesn't even know what to do with it. What was he going to do if he really had to give it up? But the nobles have always used the services of a magician. You will need to find one for sure. But of course, to hire at least one of them, you need a lot of money, and to protect such a huge territory, you need a lot of them. Of course, even there was one important point, because it was all for the sake of protecting their paper factory. Although the warriors are excellent at fighting and coping, but what will happen if they are attacked by some magician? Soldiers are good, but magic power is also needed. You can never know what will happen tomorrow, so it was decided. It's decided that their territory is looking for an experienced mage. Of course, now it was only necessary to send such an expensive request to the magic tower. Errol was sure that some free mage would be interested in such an announcement. The problem is solved, because a low-level one will also work for him. He'll make a first-class wizard out of him. He's just a genius, because now you can start distributing leaflets. Many people immediately began to look at these ads and understand that this is the very kingdom where they began to produce paper. But can't they apply there? Of course, Bala is a very strange woman who fell on the way to a piece of paper, and then made it clear that she needed this place because they will provide both housing and food. After a few days, too many mages filed their appeal. Of course, our protagonist wanted to hire all of them, so we had to arrange a personal interview. He would even test their strength personally, but it was important that they didn't become his enemies in the future. He had to make sure that all of them really wanted to work for the good. He immediately gave the data sheets and asked his man to check all the ads. Of course, the day of checking all the magicians came. A total of 12 magicians were selected. After studying their resumes, that everyone can now work for him. Many people were happy, so our character said that it was he who would now give them tasks and teach them magic, and basically they would need to take care of the forest and fields, and their wishes would also be taken into account. Of course, first of all, he will choose the main one, so he asked everyone who reached level 4 to raise their hand. Of course, 2 people raised their hands, but our main character definitely preferred the girl, although he did not judge by appearance. The main thing was that they had good skills, but then he immediately thanked the girl who would become his personal magician. Her name was Dialecki, for participating. Of course, you couldn't think that our character was making excuses, but there is another reason why he chose it, because on the day of the interview, something hooked him. He was hooked that with a resume like hers, he could go somewhere better, so why north? But Dia only said that she wanted to serve the prince. Of course, this all surprised our protagonist very much, because usually employees are interested in salary or opportunities, so why does she talk about serving the prince? Is this the reason for her application? As soon as our protagonist looked through her soul, he noticed that she didn't have any malicious intent, so does she really want to serve the prince? After all, if so, then he must take her in. Once the briefing has been explained, their responsibilities and the benefits they will receive will be revealed any minute now. Errol opened the door, where he noticed an incredibly large number of books, all recommended by the Tower of Mages. Fortunately, books are not so expensive, but it was much more difficult to just negotiate with the tower. All the mages were very happy. Of course, our main character understood that these were mostly mages who were not honored to work for the tower, just exiles, so without his help, they definitely would not have become stronger and would not have fallen apart further. Are they really that happy to get this opportunity? None of them even believed that they had so many opportunities. Of course, Errol had said that he would check their progress, so they had to try to improve their knowledge. But in reality, the goal was somewhat different. After all, he's going to use them all to learn magic, because he already knows the basics, only an in-depth study remains. The more bright minds he has, the easier it will be in the future, so it would definitely be worth giving it your all. As soon as everyone went outside, our protagonist told Deeth that they needed to restore the forest because so many forests were cut down, which is a source of earnings and paper. He asked her if she could do it or if they could do it all. The mages made it clear that they could, so a second later, the tree started to rise out of the ground. This was all very surprising to Arella because they actually do not just use magic, but use some kind of ritual, so usually can be so easily influenced by the growth process. After all, if so, is it possible to make a tree grow from scratch? Of course, the magicians answered that if you do this, the soil will dry up very quickly. You need a period for it to rest. It is better to leave it like this, at least for a month, then the soil can recover. Of course, no one canceled the environmental problems. It's good that this world is not without reasonable people, so Errol just thanked everyone for their work, and then asked them to help them grow crops. Fahilia residents, of course, they can't rely on hunting alone. They need to get the harvest. One of the mages asked, did she just need to speed up the growth of crops there? But then our main protagonist admitted that, ideally, we should generally accelerate the growth of crops in all 12 villages. Of course, he immediately apologized and said that they did not need to do this right away, because they just need to help the villagers create the necessary conditions, and he immediately showed the norms. Of course, the magicians immediately began to confer and realized that if everything was calculated, then most likely they will succeed, that they need to save mana for this. But at the same time, our main character showed them the tools that should be used. He first decided to block out the cold with a magic barrier and leave only sunlight and heat to grow crops. Something was starting to work out for them, so our character was overjoyed and said that all that remained was to do this trick in each village and make sure that none of the villages died of hunger. After that, 2 mages went to the magic tool research department, and 3 of them were assigned to guard the palace and the premises. All that was left was Daya, who didn't know what to do. Sure enough, Errol had told her that she would be his personal escort, will accompany him, and perform various tasks. Of course, our main character can't use his magic in front of everyone. He definitely needed a magic assistant. Her first assignment was to improve her magic skills with books. Daya immediately began to just burn. She said that she would do everything possible for this. It even surprised our main character very much. Did she have any reason to be so sincere? But as soon as he thought about it, of course, it was a book that Errol wrote for the knights, but it did not bring him fame because they simply do not understand the essence of what was written inside. Our main character asked why she needed such a book because she is not a knight. But all Daya said was that a friend of hers had given it to her to read. She said that both the mage and the knight had their original mana control, but the difference was just a difference. The mana management system for magicians is no different, so Errol's theory suits them. Of course, our main character also had thoughts of this nature when researching materials. It was true. However, Daya had only said that it was a Bible for her, and she had even crossed the continent to serve the author of this book. Our Errol was shocked by what he heard, because was it really such foundations that touched her? But Daya was also fascinated by the rice they served her. Of course, our main character was glad that the reason for her loyalty is so simple, so he hopes that he did not make a mistake with the choice at all. Will it still be good? Sitting in his library, our main protagonist read a lot of books at a time, which finally made him understand how his world works. Of course, first of all, he decided to see how Daya herself uses magic. Remembering how she handled it, he immediately learned to use the same type of magic as her. He decided to call himself even a professional in this case. Of course, practicing magic might seem strange, so he should start from the beginning first. In a few seconds, Errol was already in the capital of Ernesi. He came to the dwarf iron factory. Of course, his bodyguard was very bad-tempered against them, because she remembered that they were rather rude to our protagonist at the very beginning. However, our hero said that there will definitely be no problems. But as soon as they went inside, our main character immediately became very hot. Of course, the first person who met them was Ben. He is a craftsman who has been working for 15 years. Finally, our main character and his bodyguard felt sorry for the guy, because really he has been working for 15 years. But by then, Ben had already led the guests to the door where their headmaster was sitting, who was also waiting for all of them because he had received a letter. Of course, Errol had said that he had arrived so quickly because the dwarf was just incredibly impatient. Did the dwarf expect him to arrive rather late? But the dwarf didn't stand on ceremony. He immediately began pouring wine into his glass and telling him to stop talking and get to the point as quickly as possible. So as soon as the dwarf picked up his drink, he received an offer that our protagonist would like to sign a contract with half the number of all dwarves. Of course, the dwarf immediately refused, saying that he couldn't deal with a man who hadn't had a drink and already looked pretty drunk. But as soon as our hero said that he was inviting half of the dwarves to join him in private service, the dwarf immediately tapped the table and asked what it was smeared with that they would all go to such a cold place. But of course, our character knew how such a dwarf could be bribed. He said that the money would go to the background because the main currency they would have is technology as well as Damascus steel. The dwarf couldn't understand because had Damon told him that. But in fact, all this was said back when our Errol was studying alchemy. He was told by a teacher that many dwarves come to the kingdom only for the sake of these metals. Of course, the main goal of the dwarves is to make incredible creations. Of course, our protagonist said that he knows how to make this steel. However, this is not all, because if he agrees, he will be able to get new technologies and drawings. The dwarf was obviously surprised, but was the man in front of him telling the truth? But our character just said that he has knowledge and the dwarves have abilities, so if they join forces, they can come up with something. Of course, the dwarf was very interested in this, so he asked about the contract, but at the same time they had a quarrel, which lasted until they agreed to 5 years of cooperation. It was at this point that the chief dwarf made it clear that he would gather everyone in a month. But how much steel did the dwarves need anyway? By that time, Kania was sitting in the palace talking about her brother with the guards. She said that she simply could not sit in one room for more than a week, so she would immediately go to her brother's room. But as soon as she went inside, she saw that Daya was feeding our main character with a spoon, and also lifting him into the air to get dressed. Seconds later, they magically sat down at the table, but Kania still couldn't believe that her brother was so weird and lazy, but of course she was most annoyed because her brother said he was going to take a bath. Sure enough, a second later, Kania as well as the guards were standing behind her and wanted to ask something. Daya didn't understand anything and just stared. But our Errol, he was clearly concerned about the behavior of his guards as well as his sister. He asked me what it could be, but Kania identified him and slammed him down on the table, asking him why he relied so heavily on magic. Of course, our main character could not understand why those are against. Is there something wrong with D? After all, she definitely takes her work seriously, tries to serve. But Kania immediately raised her voice and said that the point is even different. Does her brother walk on his own feet by himself? Of course, Errol immediately said that he was just going to go to the bathroom, but then Kania fell on the table altogether. Our main protagonist, of course, said that there is no problem in this because Daya does not even complain about anything. But as soon as our Errol said that, all the security guards immediately started saying that it was wrong. They started coming up to Dia and saying that if she also took care of her master on the street, then many people might think something wrong. Our character even thought about what caused a shock to the guards, but then immediately said that it was a joke. Of course, Kania said a second later that if he wanted such an easy life, then he was now forbidden to use magic and also forbidden to contact Dia. Of course, Daya immediately drooped. She became so pale that she thought she was going to die. After all, is she really being fired? But only our Errol was thinking that there was something really wrong with his lifestyle because all he did lately was use Dia. He was just lazy and looked after like he was paralyzed. It was at this point that Kania said that this was exactly the problem. But Daya surprised everyone this time. She said that every time she dragged her master on her, she used magic to move his muscles a little so that they would not be atrophied. Of course, Kania was still against this use of magic, but immediately Daya said that she refused to accept all this. Only our character realized that most likely Kania took and insulted the honor of the magician. Another girl got in, of course, and asked why Daya wanted to be the master's personal magician. However, our protagonist still tried to bring his word into the conversation, but again something went wrong. He was simply ignored. Kania went on to say that she needed to be convinced that Daya was so useful that it could be created. Daya, in turn, made it clear that she would not back down, so she immediately brought a mountain of paper, which Daya sorted through in a second. Of course, Kania did not want to calm down. She brought the dishes and the cooking competition began, where this time Daya set the table in a matter of seconds, so it was also incredibly delicious. It all suited our hero. Of course, our Errol left the room where he met his guards, who nevertheless said that Kania probably suspected Dia of something. After all, there was an incident that occurred 2 days ago. Many people started to find that the security system that was most recently made was broken. Of course, our main character asked, was it really Daya? But the guards immediately said that they were just considering it, because they had a letter saying that they needed to return Dia to the magic tower. At the same time, our main character asked, after all, are they really making a fuss over such a small letter? Did they even show this letter to her? It was all true, of course, but Daya gave no sign that she felt anything at all about it. The girl trusts her, but does not understand her behavior, because why does Daya even want to take care of their master so much? Of course, Errol said it was probably because of his charisma, but he couldn't tell anyone that he saw any malice in her. He couldn't even explain it. But the thing was, Kania was just scared because of the mages. Our hero just stood up and said that he understood why Kania was reacting like this, but before giving out his decision Errol needed to think and make everything for himself. It was at this point that he had to tell her the whole truth. At this moment, everything was happening in the room right next to Daya. Of course, it was very strange, because there was almost nothing in her room, as if she had just moved in. However, Daya only talked and was very happy because she passed Kania's test. She said that for her, her abilities are much more important than things. Of course, at this point, our hero said that in fact Kania is just unhappy that he will have a personal magician. Of course, Daya knew about this because it was most likely due to the attack of the black magician. Daya didn't learn this from Kania, but because it's a fairly popular case that everyone should know about, which is exactly what the magic tower was talking about. Of course, Errol couldn't believe it. But all he really said was that he would convince Kania next time, but Daya said she didn't need that. She said that she had already passed her test, she would prove herself worthy. But still, our main protagonist did not understand why she wanted to become a personal magician so much, because they were seeing each other for the first time. Of course, Daya said it would be quite a long story. She told me that she was taken to the magic tower when she was a child. Her village where she lived was infected with the plague, so she wandered around just trying to survive. Of course, they probably took her to the magic tower because they noticed her talent for mana, but she just went on to say that she learned magic there, but wasn't good anywhere else, so in a few moments, she became bad at magic too, so she had to do strange and dirty work. Our main character simply did not understand, because how is this even possible, because she is a wonderful magician. But the girl only said that 2 years ago, she was a first-class mage, and now she is level 4. Of course, she asked to hear her story. Of course, at first she thought it was very difficult to control mana just by using the theory given to her in the tower, but then she came across our protagonist's book. Our Errol, he just jumped out of his chair, because he realized that the girl in front of him was able to reach such heights just by reading his book. Was this really a genius who could learn just from it without even knowing that there was talent in it? So it was at this point that Daya revealed that this was why she admired her master so much. He also told me that he left the tower as soon as he could get the 4th level. Of course, the one called master didn't want to let her go and was very angry, and also said that that person was incredibly rotten inside. It was after Daya left the tower that her main goal was to find Errol. She went through a lot of obstacles until she finally found the right ad. It is thanks to her master that she has become a real magician. She is incredibly happy. But as soon as Errol asked her if she wanted to tell Kania about it, Daya confessed that she would not prove it through such a long dialogue, and it is very difficult to tell it in detail. Of course, our hero immediately left the room with the words that now he will not tell anyone about it, since she does not want to. Of course, after night fell, our main character called one of the magicians and told them everything. He, in turn, said that Daya was a useless child, and it was impossible to say that her teacher was a good person. She even learned everything herself and left the tower without fear of punishment. This interested our protagonist, so he was told that with the help of a penalty, the tower tries to protect its owner, taking half the power of its host. Of course, the magician's tower was quite interesting. But at this point our main character decided that he would do everything possible to solve this case. Sure enough, it was morning, and the first thing he saw when he went outside was that Daya had already challenged Kania, or else it was the other way around. Of course, this was the last test, so Daya only decided to use magic. Our main character began to rush from side to side, asking for help from the girls, but they pretended that I could not even help anything. But since Kania was counting on it, Daya decided to start first. A second later, the auras of the archer and mage covered the field, and the result was strange, because for some reason the spell flew into the void. Kania's blow also flew there. It turned out that the dispel spell was actually flying at the enemy that was sitting under the palace wall. It was Master Dai who was chasing her. Of course, now Errol realized that this was the man Dia couldn't stand, the man who was always being talked about at the palace. The mage immediately started saying that he had a letter that said he was a mage, and also that Dia had to return to the tower. Of course, Dia said that it was all very strange, because he allowed me to study all by yourself, and now he asks you to call him teacher. Of course, the magician started to say again that she brings only troubles and all that, but at the same moment our Errol spoke up, who did not allow anyone to talk like that to Dia, especially in front of him. Of course, the mage immediately grabbed Dia's hand and said that even the lord of these lands has no manners, and that she will be punished. But as soon as that was said, our protagonist knocked the magician's hand away from his personal magician and said that she had already signed a personal contract with him. The mage was obviously shocked by this information, since she had no right to become a mage at all without the tower's permission. This was all very annoying for our main character, so he said that this was the reason why he had asked permission from the tower much earlier, and in general it was necessary to get out of his kingdom before it got even worse. Sure enough, the mage immediately threw strange orbs on the floor, from which his golems emerged. He said that now Dia will definitely return to him, and the magic tower will protect him in case of anything. Our protagonist continued scratching his ear, so in a second he immediately asked to deal with all the golems and teach a lesson to such a person. The mage thought that the golem behind Errol was going to deal with him, but that golem was immediately destroyed by Dia's magic. She of course went after her old mage teacher and imprisoned him in a tornado. The mage realized that he wasn't getting anywhere. So in a second, I used the emergency teleport scroll. As soon as it was over, the girls were furious that they had missed such a but our Errol asked them not to worry. Dia started apologizing, of course, as she apologized for the inconvenience, but the master said that it was fine because they had noticed a person like Master earlier, so they decided to let Dia show off. Immediately, Kania became incredibly kind and immediately went to support her new colleague. The mage, in turn, was in the snowy forest, still unable to accept the fact that Dia had left him. But at that moment, he noticed someone on the branch. He fired magic at him, but it didn't hit. It was our hero who decided to catch up with the magician on his own and punish him by simply firing a projectile of fire at him, which accurately punished the magician. Of course, after this incident, everything went back to normal. Dia continued to serve our main character, even though Kania still forbade the evil use of magic in this way. Of course, Dia still couldn't believe that she wasn't causing problems. But immediately Errol said that there was no problem with this, to which Dia only said that everything would be fine now, because she would serve faithfully. Never would our character think that he would be respected by a magician. Outside, the weather was great, so much so that Errol wanted to use magic to learn how to use it. His magic was so strong that it almost burned the entire forest. Sure enough, he was looking deep into the forest, and then he decided it was time to start. Of course, he remembered his childhood, he remembered how many people looked at him, but the queen still can't let go of him. She even now started acting against his mother, so now is the time to start her plan. The first thing he did was set up a barrier, fly around the queen's house, and then decided that it was time to launch fireballs at their house. The whole house was incredibly scared of everything, but our Errol, he had fun to the fullest. He continued to fly under the magic of invisibility as well as stunning. He even decided to mock everyone and go to the treasury. By that time, while he was having fun, the king was given a letter containing the lyrics of the song that our main character left for the queen. Of course, she was just shocked. She fell to the floor because did the king really get hurt? But she was immediately told that everything was fine. The next day, the king immediately summoned all the mages of the kingdom, who discussed that the attack was a level 6 mage and all the other nobles were sick. Of course, the queen knew that she would be the next one to be hit, which she knew perfectly well. Everyone found out about these actions, including the guards of our hero, but he was even glad. He said that just a certain robber attacked people who were disgusting to him. Of course, he began to focus on this. He only went further into his territories, where he noticed that the houses created with the help of magic allow you to grow rye, that now they do not have to worry about food. The inhabitants were incredibly happy with all this. They cried with happiness, because they would never have thought that they would be able to grow something on such cold lands. Our Errol said that this is a credit to all his mages who work hard every day. He even thought that everything would be fine if it continued like this. 50 years ago, there were 3 main kingdoms. Among them was the Demul Kingdom Demul, which had a much smaller influence among the other 2, but they were strong in turning the 2 other sovereigns against each other. It was at their banquet that we got. There was a lord, as well as another person who had brought a certain elixir with him. It is the elixir, taking which hair appears. Of course, the man gave the lord this elixir for nothing, but he hinted a little that his son would become a minister next year. The lord understood what the man was implying, of course, and we, in turn, understand that this particular kingdom is known for its products. Of course, after 50 years at this rate, this kingdom is falling apart. The king is very saddened by the fact that in 5 years the entire economy will be broken. This particular gap was created by the very boy named Errol. But is there really no way to close this gap between the realms? Of course, the king's right-hand man made it clear that they didn't have time to think. They had to decide what they needed to do right away. They just needed to join forces, not fight. Of course, after that, the kingdom sent out 3 letters inviting people to join the alliance. The first was Duke Merman, the second Duke Merlin. Just then, they were all sitting at the table, but no one else came. Of course, the right hand of the king made it clear that they could start without him, so at the same time, the discussion began, how can they even defeat such a strong kingdom? But the king's right-hand man only said that they would be able to defeat such a strong kingdom if they worked together, that if they attacked together, the other kingdom would simply not be able to develop. He was absolutely sure that some 14-year-old boy would not be able to do anything against them, that they would be able to deal with him. Of course, the first duke was happy with this offer, and the second duke was also ready, so the king's right hand immediately began to suffer his hands. At this moment in Indonesia, the king knew that he had a bad feeling about all sorts of contracts, so he decided to prepare for the worst, because they now have enough resources to resist such enemies, and immediately asked to send a letter to all their lands. Of course, the letter came to our protagonist, who realized that most likely he overdid it, that he should not have shown all his abilities. Daya noticed that her master was not in a good mood, but he only replied that he needed to meet Kania. Of course, it was the king's right hand that made it clear to everyone that the only easy target would be our main character, because he was just a kid. It was they who exposed him as the most evil being, which does not allow them to live. Kania, in turn, also talked about how it would be possible to attack your enemies first, but then they would give themselves away. Of course, Errol thought it might happen, but it certainly wouldn't happen anytime soon. He knew that a lot of people might die, but what was his sister going to do? Our protagonist only thought that it would be good to return to the palace, because there the father is also very concerned about this situation, and the status of a princess is more important than the status of a knight. But as soon as these words were uttered, Kania only replied that she did not think that this was all so. Then our main character just said that this is not a joke, she can actually recover on the battlefield. But Kania just smiled and said that it was for this reason that she swore loyalty to our main protagonist, because if this is her decision, then of course he will inform everyone about it to his father, who can't even do anything about it. Later, we see that the female knights continue to drink. They realize that they will probably have to fight soon. But why Ishados and Isha want to go home? Because her wrestler entered the academy this year. Of course, Isha said he'd figure it out for himself, so there's nothing wrong with that. They don't even know what might happen. As soon as they finish their glasses, they asked Diyu to pour them more, but she, like a real magician, made all the contents of the bottle disappear with her mouth. Of course, Errol didn't waste any time. He was fully prepared for the war. He understood that if something went wrong, he would have to spend his birthday on the battlefield, so as a past professional in this business, he needed to approach very responsibly. He understood that the only reason he had to fight was because he needed to live an easy life. But how could his city survive at all? Of course, by then, he'd gone straight to his guest, the dwarf, who wasn't exactly happy to see him. Of course, he asked at this point, what does our character require this time? But he only said that this time he needed a special request. As soon as the request was given, the dwarf lost his temper, because how would he even need to prepare 20,000 sets of armor? As soon as Errol ran out with the thought that one day he would definitely end his life after being hit by a hammer, then his next place to go was of course the slaver, who this time owed our hero as many as 50,000 people. That's how this video ends.
इस वीडियो को लाइक करें, हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें, बेल आइकन जरूर प्रेस करें हमारी न्यू वीडियो सबसे पहले देखने के लिए। सब्सक्राइब करने के बाद ना घंटी बजा देना, ताकि जब भी मैं कोई न्यू वीडियो अपलोड करूं तो तुम्हारे फोन की घंटी भी बजे।